Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, aloha, and happy Friday. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UFOs. My name's Luis Jimenez. Today we have a very fun and special guest, but before we get started, I just want to quickly remind you of a couple of things. Obviously, subscribe, like, share the channel. That's an obvious. We have a ton of links in the description below, all of our guests links where you can get their information and follow their content. And the other link, the most important link I think in there is the link to Congress, the link to your senators. So if you want to join in on the big phone home, if you want to get an early start, the links are there. So don't be shy and start calling our representatives, because we want more UAP transparency. And so on that note, today's guest is going to be a lot of fun. He's on the other side of the ocean, the other side of the world. He hosts a very fun podcast that is growing, I'm sure, at an exponential rate. And we're going to talk about that. And his name is Andy McGrillen. He is the host and content contributor on YouTube. I'm assuming it's the same show. I've watched both channels. And the name of the show is called That UFO Podcast. It's an awesome show. They just had a wonderful interview with George Knapp. So without further ado, let me bring on to the stream Mr. Andy McGrillen. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, man. Thank you for having us on, Luis. It's a pleasure to speak to you in person as well, not just over the Twitter feeds as we have been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been really excited to talk to you. I mean, we've missed a couple of chats behind the scenes where, obviously time and families and all sorts of things come into play when trying to organize things. So we missed each other on some things, but I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we're talking, because I love your show. I love all the things that you guys at UAP Media UK are doing. And I love that I kind of just found you guys. So I'm super, super happy about that. And it's weird because we're doing the same. We're doing the same thing, but in very, very different ways.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about where you're from. I just want to know everything about Andy. So if you guys in the chats have questions, save them for the end. We're going to be taking chats, and if you can, calls. Also, I want to remind guys, this is the internet. For some reason, right before we went live with Andy, my internet just started acting funky. So if I'm coming in, choppy, or it doesn't look great, I apologize. But hey, first world problems, right? And I also want to say thank you to Andy, Strafe, Graham, let's see here, Rusty, all of you guys in the chat. Thank you for being here. The 11 folks that are here live right now as we speak. I'm sure more will join us. So Andy, let's start with where you're from. What if you want to talk about, like, what do you do for a living, kids, wife, how you met her? Like, I want to know everything about you personally, if you want to talk about it, but because I do feel like getting to know people on a personal level and sort of getting to know their vulnerabilities and exploring those people serves the community well, serves this discussion well, because it just goes to show that you're a real person behind this show and behind this podcast. You have a family, you have bills, things like that, real life things. Everybody has real life things, but it's also important to sometimes put those aside and maybe pay attention to something extraordinary that's right in your face. So let's get started with, where exactly are you in the world?
Emotionally, physically, mentally, all different answers.
Yeah.
I'm based in the UK, so I'm from Glasgow in Scotland, so people pretty much have picked up on the Scottish accent, so it's probably toned down a little bit for the podcast, and so people everywhere else can understand me. I live in the north of England, about 3 hours away from Glasgow, and just outside Newcastle, called Northumberland, so it's kind of rural, little housing places, and we've got a cinema around the corner and stuff, so it's not exactly backwater country, but it's quiet from what I'm used to. I've kind of always grown up in the city and stuff. I know you're out there in smoggy Los Angeles, as you call it, congested, but that's what I like. I'm quite city boy at heart, so I'm always used to like noise and everything. Like one of the best sleeps I ever had was a 2-week holiday to New York about 10 years ago, just because I like the noise at night. So that would I think LA would suit me, but I don't think the wife would like it.
No, most wives I feel like don't like LA, especially when it's time to put kids in school systems. It gets dicey. Then there's very few spots in those schools where parents want to send their kids. So that would be, I think, the biggest drawback. But the weather, I mean, I don't think anybody could ever complain about that.
I could. I'm Scottish, and I've got very, very white skin. And this isn't a trick of the light. This isn't a trick of the light. I am this white. So it never gets any better. I either burn or stay white.
Fair enough. Well, I guess that means you guys don't get a ton of sun out there, I'm assuming.
When we do, I stay away from it. Hence the black hoodie, and I'm happy being indoors. If you know what, I would love to put my hood up as well, but you're doing it, so it'll look bad if we both do it. So it looks really comfy.
No, all hoodies welcome on this show. So if you want to put up the hoodie, go for it. Yeah,
I might do as the temperature drops in here, but yeah.
How cold is it? How is the weather out there right now?
It's chilly. Still pretty cold. Probably freezing for what you would consider cold. It's and I kind of record in a little space outside my home. It's a glorified shed that I've got some kind of backdrop there and the Lou poster up on the wall that I've tried to kind of make a lot more homely. It's nowhere near as nice as anywhere. Like you've got a nice little space to record in, and most of my guests do as well.
No. Okay, so let's, I'm sure if you peek behind the curtain of any one of these shows, you'll see that this is a very small, simple, glued together with fishing string and toilet paper setup. All of this back here is my girlfriend. She's got the eye and the talent for all of that. So she made this very, very tiny office in a 1-bedroom apartment look like a legitimate studio. So nice. She's done a killer job. And if you let me know if you ever want to redo your studio. She can do a 3-dimensional rendering. I'm already putting work on her that she probably doesn't want to do, but she can do a 3-dimensional rendering if you just give me the measurements of your room, and she will put together something awesome that will involve anything that you got there in the house. She's great at it. I think
my wife would kill me. Like I've spent enough on microphone and PC, and I genuinely right. So you've asked us already, and I don't want to jump all over the place. And hello to everyone in the chat, because I can see loads of names like Strafe and Graham and stuff that I speak to quite regularly. Andy, Chris, Ryan Sprague. Ryan. So hi to everyone. Sorry if I miss anyone.
No.
But like when I started the podcast, right? Do you want to even know this? Like I'll just talk crap. So like I bought a microphone before I had a name for the podcast, right? And the idea was last year we were about going to lockdown, and there was rumors of all that kind of stuff, and pandemic was kind of kicking off officially everywhere. And I was like, okay, I'll buy a microphone, and if I'm ever going to do a podcast, it'll be during a global pandemic, because we're all going to have loads of time in our hands. Right. And the microphone sat in a box for about a month, not doing anything. And then it got to the point of, do I just sell it, or do I actually do something about this? So I had a microphone, and I tried to look up how I could record on my phone. And then I was like, that's not going to work. So I bought like a cheap laptop. And then I had this laptop and a microphone, and I started emailing people to see if they would want to come on the podcast. And one of the first people I emailed was Gary Voorhees, and he was very polite and agreed to come on. And I said to him, I don't even have a name for the podcast just now. I just want to talk about UFOs. I know you were on the Nimitz Princeton event and stuff, and he was like, yep, no problem, anything you want. And I kind of got down to it. So I still find it amazing that people now think I'm in this kind of probably nicer space than I am. And you probably get the same, where you've got all this fancy equipment and stuff. And it's like, I get people saying you and the team at the podcast. The team is me. Hi. And that's not to take away from Dan and like me and Dan. Like we'll talk about how me and Dan met and stuff as well. But like Dan helps me out with some like artwork and stuff. And coming on the podcast now and again. But I remember George Knapp mentioned this during the UAP media interview with him about you guys at the podcast, and Dan wanted to come in and say the podcast just Andy. But I don't need the credit, but it is just me. That's it. And same with like Dave at the magazine. It's just Dave does that full magazine himself, and you'll appreciate your show. I'm guessing you don't have 4 or 5 producers with you, all kind of going, Luis, for time, and I'm going to edit it for you. You do all the work yourself, but it's fun. You enjoy it as well. So
well, that's funny. That's sort of the same thing that happened to me. I started the show just before the pandemic hit. And then, the idea was to bring my other actor friends in and sort of get their opinions and talk to them about the phenomena. And then that had to end right away. So then it just became, well, I guess I'll just review these films and movies on my own, or articles or whatever news comes out. And then, I emailed, who was the first person I emailed? It was Martin Willis. And I was just like, hey, just taking a shot in the dark here. It's a new show. You have absolutely every right to say no. But would you like to come on? I'd love to pick your brain about all of these things that I have questions about. And he did without hesitation. And it was awesome. And then I asked Alejandro Rojas. Same exact thing happened. I'm like, Jesus, this is crazy. And then I was like, you know what? Let me try MJ Banias. And then MJ was like, yeah, no problem, dude. I'll totally come on. I'm like, oh my goodness. And then, Ryan Sprague hit me up. He's like, hey man, I'd love to come on your show anytime you want. I'm like, dude, you want to come on my show? Like, I was like, this is insane. So the community has been very open arms, but you're right. This looks a lot fancier than what it is, but I mean, this is a bucket of paint and putting some art in proper frames, and that's about it. Buying a shelf and it's her eye, because she's like a marketing, that's what she does for a living. So she put it together in a snap, and it just came out so good. So when I say we, I include her as well, because she puts up with all of this crap too. Like, this takes away from time together. I'm doing 2 shows a week. Sometimes I do 2 or 3 live streams a week. Because news breaks so fast, and this is not. I try to keep it as cheap as possible here too, man. So I feel that, and I think the thing that screams through all of these things that we try to do to make it look better, sound better, is the passion that you put into it. And I think that's why people have resonated with your show and what you're doing. And I think that's why maybe sometimes you guys all get looped into one thing, into one entity, because all of you guys have this incredible passion, and it seems like you're always talking to each other. But I love that it's, one guy does the podcast, one guy does magazines and articles, and the other guy is doing art and finding ways to promote all 3. And it's a beautiful little unofficial organization that it's just like this 3 Musketeers, as I probably would call it. You guys are just doing amazing work, and I think it's it's accidental that you guys get all lumped into one thing, but maybe that's telling you something. Maybe you guys should start an official company or something.
Do you know what? I like it, and I do have to say as well that it's 4 because it's Andreas Freeman style, and it's Adam is his name on Twitter. Adam Goldsack does a whole load of work as well. He's just not had the time or the ability to, and again, it's like you say, family life and commitments, all that kind of stuff, to come on some of the shows we have done, because it's so much of the audience. We love the UK audience, that's where we are from, but so much of the audience is based in the US or Canada. So the shows we tend to record are 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And it's not always possible for him to come on. So 4 Musketeers, give Adam a shout out, because the work he does, I couldn't do. Honestly, the writing and stuff.
You could also throw UFO Twitter. You want to throw 5 Musketeers in there. There are so many Musketeers in this fight. It's definitely beyond 3. That is for sure. And Andreas Freeman Stahl is doing incredible work. And that article he wrote that was retweeted by Christopher Mellon was such an like it gave me goosebumps when that happened. And even before, like, just the article gave me goosebumps reading that article. And it was like, wow, somebody took the time to put words, post this, it just means a lot. And it goes again to show how open and welcoming this UFO universe is. I don't know what we call it.
UFO community, whatever. I mean, it's welcoming, and you've got I was just being called smug half an hour ago, and I was like, because I'm disagreeing with something on the Mick West, Lou Elizondo stuff, but it's fun. And then you get involved in Reddit, and that's a whole other ball game. Reddit's a great laugh, like especially when you're like me and just like being abused. So yeah.
Well, you know what, Reddit, I for some reason I just haven't figured out Reddit.
Me neither.
I don't know how to use it, and I've been like asking people. Nobody wants. I've been trying to look it up, and I mean, it seems kind of similar to Facebook, but there are a lot of rules on how you post things.
Yeah,
and then a lot of the times, the things that I do get on there, I'm like, this is garbage. I think the UFO Twitter side of things is got a it can be harsh sometimes. It can be cut to the bone, so to speak. But it's also got the information is a lot more scrutinized on UFO Twitter.
Yeah,
not as just like, absolutely, this is real. Let me share it or bump it up. It's like if this looks like kind of like BS, chances are it doesn't get a lot of love on UFO Twitter, which is I like that.
Do you know what suits me as well, though, is I like I think it's 280 characters now, but when it was, I like the small bites of information. I don't have the stamina for the big articles and the blogs, and like Joe Murgia is awesome, but he does these 20 or 30 piece tweets, and I'm like, oh my god, like I mean, he's summarizing stuff within these, but it's so much work, and it's just like it's amazing. But and like I say, this is where I give Dan, Dave, and Adam a lot of credit, because I'll jump on the Signal group we've got, and I'll say, what was that about earlier on that I seen, and I asked them to summarize it for me. I'll ask them to summarize a summary,
and they do it in a sentence.
And I'm like, right, okay. Do I need to know that? No. Do I need to? Oh, right, okay, that's interesting. So.
Man, I got to get in on that Signal chat, because there are a lot of things also on Twitter that I'm just like, whoa. I'm still like, I'm so new to it. Like, I'm new to the. I've had Twitter forever, but it would just be to just like, send off a tweet. I would never retweet or look at other tweets. It was just like a completely self-serving thing. And then this started happening. I'm like, oh, okay, how do I retweet? What does this mean? Like, oh, I could quote the tweet and say something in it. Okay, cool. Like, it just all these crazy things.
It's your pod, but can I ask you a question?
Fire away, man. There's no rules here.
Yeah. Okay. Have you tried TikTok yet?
No.
That makes me feel old. No. Adam told me about get on TikTok and you do some little videos, and I posted up like a clip of the Lou Elizondo interview, and I was like, I don't understand this. I have no, and do you know what? I don't have the will to understand it either. I don't want to. Same as Snapchat. I don't get Snapchat.
If I was 20 years younger, I feel like I would totally get it, and I would totally be into it, and I would totally know how to use it to market myself. Here's the thing. I could probably figure it out. I kind of understand a little bit what it is. I just don't want to. Like, I've already got Twitter, I've already got Instagram, I've already got Facebook, I've already got YouTube, I've already got my channel, I've already got a post, edit, like I've got so many things to look at. I don't, like you said, I don't have a team of people here like responding to every tweet or, I'm doing everything essentially by myself. So to add a TikTok and do dances or memorize whatever, it to me, it seems like a waste of time.
Yeah, I respond to tweets and because I'm aware that I've got a lot of people listening, this does sound smug, so maybe that guy was right around the world, okay? But, if I wake up at 2:00 in the morning, I check my phone and I'll just jump on Twitter quickly and I'll try and respond even just with a few words to people, because I feel bad that I miss messages during the night, because when I go to bed, you guys are, especially in LA, it's like your evening time. So people will be like sending messages or getting in touch with me because they've just finished work, but then I sleep. And I've got the kids up early and stuff, so I try and respond to all different in the day. And like you say, it's so hard to keep up. And I do feel guilty if I miss.
It seems like Dan's up all the time. And it doesn't. I don't know how he does it, but he seems like to be watching everything that drops. And I'll see him come and I'll be like, dude, how are you up right now? What's going on over there?
No. So what you've missed is Dan is a night owl. Okay. So Dan doesn't really cover very well that 6 a.m. till 12 p.m. slot. So I think if anything broke within that time, you're probably finding Dan still asleep. But he very much covers the other 3/4 of a day, which is good. So I don't mind in the morning, but
that makes sense. It's almost like you guys are working shifts. That's what that's good. I like that. Nobody misses anything in the Three Musketeer world. Okay, so you play. I know you're a huge football fan.
Yeah, you could have got me in trouble with your post.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Why? What happened?
So when I messaged you back and I was like, "Oh, do you know like Scottish football or like soccer for anyone else?" And you were like, "No, I just know you like it." And I was like, "Yeah." So there's a huge like rivalry, like really, really. I think it'd be hard for maybe like people abroad to understand. Like it's more of a European, but particularly British thing. Yeah. And so I've always kept the fact that I support Rangers. Like not a secret, but I don't talk about football on my UFO stuff because they're very, very separate. But then you posted,
oh no,
because you've got me on Facebook. No. You posted the tweet of us, and I was like, oh my god! And I started getting listeners in the UK getting in touch with me, like DMing me, and on Facebook going, "Oh, look at this!" So now I know who you support, and I was like, ah,
oh no.
And I showed my wife and I showed my friends, so it was it was pretty.
That was unintentional.
It was
totally
funny. Don't
unintentional.
worry.
Oh man, God, I didn't even think about how the sort of the extreme fanaticism of it over there. That I wasn't even aware that you didn't share that.
It was. Listen, it had to come out at some point, but
oh my god. Well. Man, I hope you liked the.
It was amazing. I loved it. Yeah, it was really, really good.
Oh man,
really good.
Okay, no, well, so cool. Did the Rangers win a big game here recently?
God, I mean, I don't want to bore the listeners with football talk, but it's the biggest. It's probably the biggest, almost the biggest season ever, like for us, like football wise, and we were. God, people knowing this story are going to laugh, right? But we were kind of put down to the bottom division about 9 years ago, because of those issues with finances and all that kind of stuff, and we had to come straight, work our way back up through the system, and we got promoted and then issues, and we got back in, and the team was really bad, and then we've had to build our way back up. And there's a famous thing in Scotland where no team has won more than 9 leagues in a row. There's only 2 teams win the league here, Rangers and Celtic. That's it. Everyone else just takes part in the league, essentially. Yeah. So Celtic have won it 9 years in a row, and this was the chance they had to win the 10th, which we've both done 9 before, but they had never done 10, and neither have we. And we stopped it in their big season. So this is like we've finally got a better team, and we're doing really well. And we've won it in the fastest time in 102 years, and it's been pretty good.
I've always thought the way the leagues over there work are perfection, because if your team is purposefully doing bad, you're going to get demoted to the lower league.
Yeah, you don't have that, do you? In a lot of sports in the US?
No sports, none. It's I couldn't imagine if the Yankees finished dead last in Major League Baseball, they would be a AAA team the next year. Yeah. Like, that's what's going on over there. Like, I love it because it incentivizes those teams at the bottom to not be at the very bottom and try to get to the top. But then again, if you hit the rock bottom, there's only one way to go. It's up. So sometimes it's almost like a destroying of an organization's ego to pick all of those pieces back up and put it together and win a huge game or championship or cup or whatever it is.
Yeah. It's a unique beast, particularly in Scotland, the way things work, but it's just the way it's always been, and I don't think it's going to change. So I can see someone commenting, Stevie, Liverpool legend. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Yep, and Rangers legend now as well. So
I love it, man. Well, I that's one of my bucket list things to do is to go see for some reason my old roommates used to watch Premier League, and I just picked a team based off of the colors in the jersey. So for some reason I went with Liverpool. Okay. I was just like, yeah, I like Liverpool. Go Liverpool. And I knew nothing about it, but one day I would love to go over there and actually attend. a match. But yeah, people are loving the sports talk. So
good. Well, if you ever get over, I'll make sure that happens. I know people that have got seats at Liverpool, and I'll take you to see Rangers. I've got 2 tickets for Rangers. Like,
I'd go to either one. So. I'd go to both if I could. I will take you up on that if I do come. Absolutely. So for sure. Okay. So, well, I wanted to ask about it because I was like, well, you don't like going outside much. So do you play? Did you play when you were in school?
I like playing football. I actually played basketball when I was in like high school. I'm going to use your terminology, high school, I suppose you would call it.
Right. Well, what is it called over there again? Primary?
Secondary. Yeah, secondary. You get primary, then secondary. And then it's even different in Scotland and England. But I played like basketball and like badminton and stuff like that because although I loved football, I wasn't as good as some of the other kids to play at that level, but I could play football now and I enjoy it. But I could do with losing some weight to actually run about a football pitch for a while.
Man, well, I can tell you this quarantine did not do me any favors in that department. That is for sure. We had to start over from scratch as far as losing some pounds or stones, as you guys call it. So yeah, it's like I had to completely reset and start from scratch again on that front. But hey, it's coming along, and we're getting there. So Scottish, do you? I swear to God, everybody in the chat, do you play golf?
No. So I used to live across. I used to live across the road. I have played golf.
Yeah,
but I don't play golf actively. So where I lived in Glasgow was like I guess you would call it a relatively poor sort of area. It was a bit mixed, but I lived across from a golf course, and I'm sure you know a golf course has got 18 holes.
Yep.
The one I lived across from had 9 because that's just the sort of area I lived.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got those out here.
Oh yeah, cool. So one of the 2 times when I was a kid, I played golf with my friend who was into golf. I broke my thumb playing golf, where I was on the 9th hole, and whoever was starting their round on the 1st had sliced the ball over onto the 9th. And the guy asked, if you don't mind standing to the side, could you stand over there? And I was like, yeah, no problem, that's fine. But I stood still at an angle to him, but he was hitting the ball that way, and I'm over here, and he sliced it again, and I was standing with my hand on top of the club, and the ball just shot and smacked. It could have hit me in the face, but I mean, it looks like it did, but no, it hit me in the thumb and broke my thumb. So I managed to get a bit of a weird injury playing golf.
That is a weird injury. I don't think I've ever played with anybody. I've seen people get really close to getting hit, but not actually get hit. So yeah, that's like an anomaly.
Yeah,
that's probably as rare as a UFO sighting.
Yes, for it honestly, to hit me in the thumb and not anywhere else is probably pretty lucky. But
man, yeah. Okay, so speaking of UFOs, let's get into it. Because I do love at the end of your interviews, you go into these rapid fire sort of, okay, Bob Lazar, yes or no? Yeah, Roswell, yes or no? I love it, because it sort of try to put people on the spot and just get the quick 1 word opinion if you can on it. But we don't have to do that tonight. We can go on for a while. So I just recently listened to your George Knapp interview, which, by the way, congratulations. I think that is an amazing feat to have that man come on your show, and then also him having the interest to want to interview you and Dan and the fellas there. Like, I think that is a tremendous compliment to what you guys are doing. So congratulations on that front. How did you feel it went? What were there questions you wish you had asked, and what are they?
Do you know what? Like, I don't think so. Not this time. That there was stuff that I wanted to follow up on in the interview, and I don't know if this will sound really odd, and I don't know if you get the same as me. Okay, you know when you're interviewing someone, like I'm listening to the person I'm interviewing, but I'm not like digesting the information in the way, like, you know, if I'm listening to one of your podcasts or I'm listening to Ryan Sprague interview someone, I'm listening to the interview in the back and forward. Okay, but when I'm interviewing someone, it's just like I'm waiting on the next question, or I'm picking up something they've said, and I'm going, okay, I'm going to follow up on that. So while I'm listening, I'm not really digesting the interview. So people come back after my interviews and they're like, oh, they said this, and I'm like, oh, did they? Or like sometimes Dan sits in and Dan will take notes for me on like the Lou interview or the George one. So that's why I had so much with George, because Dan timestamped it in the background for me and listened to it as I was doing it. But other than that, like I'm not great. I don't have a great memory at all. I've a terrible memory. I'm not a memory guy. So I write loads of stuff. I've got post-it notes, right? So this is my technical studio. I post-it note stuff and then stick it to my PC as I'm doing the interviews. Glimpse behind the actor's curtain, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But there was a few things he touched on that I wanted to follow up, but I had 90 minutes max.
Right.
And you know, with any guest, you get the feeling that some guests will come on and go, yep, you as long as you want, and you can go 2 or 3 hours. Some guests, you're like with Lou Elizondo, I had 60 minutes. It was on a media run, and he had an interview after me, and you're like, okay, you need to maximize that. George, I had 90. But you know, when you get to around 70-ish minutes, and there was so much, I'm kind of live editing in my head, and I'm taking out questions as I'm going through it. And like listener questions, I'm going, I can't ask that, it's too late, or that would be too much of a curveball, or I've got a bit of an order I'm going to go in, but George brings up something that I might as well talk about that now because he's brought it up now, and I try and circle back. And so there was a few things that I thought I want to follow up on that, but it's either I feel it's a waste of time, and that's obviously just my opinion. It might not be right or wrong, but there's other stuff I think just like I could ask more, but you're just going to get I can't talk about that, or so it's best just to leave some things open-ended, like the stuff today with the bodies comment he made has got people talking.
Right. Yeah. Because I went, what? Yeah, that was a good moment in the show. And I'm sure you're probably getting a lot of flack for, well, why didn't you dig into that a little more?
Do you know what? I got more flack before it, where some people, like the Patreons, had heard it 24 hours early. Right. And they had commented. I put that up, and I've never really done that before, but I put that up as a tease for the interview, and I would never sensationalize anything or make stuff up. What's the point? This subject's sensational enough, okay? And there's enough out there that there's not a lot of concrete evidence for, so a lot of it is pure speculation. But he did say that, so I pretty much put word for word that on Twitter, that I asked about this. George mentioned he'd been offered a clearance. He said that he didn't take it up due to the fact he was a journalist, and it would mean he would find out more, and he couldn't report on that though. And he feels, what's the point in that as a journalist? So personally, it would have been great. And he said I would have found out where the goodies are. And I was going to move on, and I paused for a second and just said, George, I have to ask you, like, when you say the goodies, do you mean like crashed materials? And he said, he kind of paused and went, and bodies. So at that point, you kind of want to go, what bodies? What so what bodies are you talking about? Has someone told you about bodies? He's not going to tell me yes. He's not going to tell me, Andy, do you know what? Actually, there is rumors of bodies out in this area. So what's the point in following that up? Right. And I get some people might get frustrated with that, but let's be realistic. He is not going to tell me. He's not going to sit on my podcast and tell me where he has potentially heard there might be, you know, ET bodies or whatever they might be. So some things are maybe better left a little bit open-ended like that for people to kind of fill in the blanks themselves. But that was one bit I could have dug into, but didn't. There was one thing that didn't make the podcast, and I don't know if this might be something that interests you. And it was something that me and Dan before the podcast were running through some questions, and I like to kind of bounce off some of the things I want to talk about with Dan, and I'll ask him, you know, as a listener, would you want to hear this? Because that's the way I try and do the podcast. And Dan had brought up that he would quite like to hear, when they go on Rogan, what's it like? As in, you know, does Rogan pick the subjects? Is there anything beforehand they talk about that's off the table? You know, what's the conversation like before or during? What's the production like? And that would be really interesting to me. But
the process of that.
Yeah, but when you've got 90 minutes and you've got 50 listener questions, and you're trying to think of like the best ones, not even the best ones, but sometimes the most relevant ones to ask. And then, as well as that, I'm trying to get in Bob Lazar, Skinwalker, Jeremy Corbell, Bob Bigelow. It's
not only that, you could probably find the answer to that question somewhere on the internet. Somebody has probably documented their experience from finish to end on the Joe Rogan podcast. I know for sure that with almost all of his guests, he has dinner the night before, and sort of talks to them, especially if it's a big guest. And I know that definitely happened with Corbell, with Lazar, and I'm pretty sure with George and James Fox. Because at some point in all of those podcasts, he references that dinner.
Okay.
You know, we were talking about dinner last night, and then blah, 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 and then they'll start talking. So I know that's definitely part of it. I'd like to though, but I agree. Yeah, I'm curious to know where is that bunker? Like, who designed it? You know, what is, you know, you're right. Like, how does he format the show? And I think just because I know a lot of people that know him, you know, sort of there's 6 degrees of separation, but I don't think there is a plan to the show. I think he sort of pre-interviews them at dinner, and then he comes to the table. I'm sure he gets like things that people cannot talk about.
Yeah,
for sure gets that. But then past that, I think there's no plan, because I think, going back to what you said earlier, it's difficult to listen 100% to what everything that's being said by the people on your show. And sometimes, you know, as you're producing and looking at questions and looking at things in the chat, you might miss something that somebody said where you wish you'd gone back and you'd stop the show and you'd been like, whoa, let's talk about that. But yeah, I 100% sympathize with you, especially when, I mean, with Lou Elizondo, he gave me an hour and a half, and then literally a minute before he came on, he's like, hey, can you cut this to an hour? I was like, so yeah, it's tough. What if you could choose one thing? I'm sure there are a lot of things, but if there's one thing you could sit down and have an unlimited time discussion on George Knapp with, what would it be?
Just from a personal point of view, the Lazar stuff, and I'll qualify that with, like, the Bob Lazar story is really well known. So there was no point in me going over loads of old ground on my podcast with it, because people know the story and you can find out plenty about it. And George mentioned that on mini-series. It's been about for 30 years, and documentaries and movies, and he's been on Rogan, and there's the Netflix documentaries. So what's the point in me asking those same questions? So I try and do just a little bit different, or ask something outside of it, or the follow-up, and keep it a bit more modern. But I would love to sit down and just really talk about, and again, I suppose, like, to answer your question, it has to be if George was going to be, like, totally upfront and honest with me and not hold anything back, have that kind of one-to-one, okay, you know, like, what is the issue with the school stuff? What she did go into a little bit on my podcast about, he reckons he did attend those places, but not necessarily officially as a student, and he maybe just sat certain classes that isn't the normal, you know, stuff like that. Again, there's rumors that George knew exactly where the element 115 was, and, you know, what potentially did happen to that. You know, why does that just disappear? And basically pick through all the little holes within the story, as to, you know, how could we clear this up? How could we get rid of that? But then, does that take away some of the mystique and the interest? And that's not to say it doesn't mean it's true, but maybe those parts are there for a reason. So I think it's a really fascinating story, and he's a fascinating character. That's something I would love to have talked to him a lot more about. Yeah,
I'm curious to know if I could. I'm sure he'll never answer this, but I'd love to know, on a percentage wise, how much percentage he believes or doesn't believe. Like, is it 60%, 70% of Bob Lazar, do you believe? Or are you 100% in his corner as far as the story is true? I don't know if he'd go 100% in that camp. He always seems to pull back right before he gets there. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that's a story? First of all, I mean, because it's such a, I think it's a dividing topic within the community. And and I'm trying to have discussions that doesn't make it so. I'd like to have some just logical discussions on the story and the timeline and who met who and when, and you know, occupations at the time and things people did. And it's like, if you say one thing that offends somebody, but it's a fact, it can really turn off a ton of people. So, you know, I guess, yeah, if you could answer the question without getting yourself into too much trouble, do you think that Bob Lazar story is true? Or if you put a percentage on it. Sorry to cut you off.
No. So percentage wise, like 85, 80%, I reckon enough of it's true to be fascinating. I think there's an element of he has worked on some sort of back engineer craft, and but it's just hard to believe that the guy came out and there was 9 craft and he worked on one of them particularly to do with back engineering, and they could kind of do test flights on certain things. And he talked about walking past a room and seeing 3 small, what was kind of warped to be greys or bodies or like people, aliens. Just say it's a UFO podcast. God, I can say aliens. He saw basically aliens in a room, but then it came back that maybe they weren't aliens. He just saw 3 small entities and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's plenty to it. But I think the beauty for if you're in like counterintelligence or you want to muddy the waters on anything like this, not to get all conspiracy-ish, but all you have to do is put out one very basic little lie, one little spanner in all that story, and that just totally breaks down everything else, that you start to wonder, oh well, if that's not true, or if this is questionable, then what else is questionable? And I think you see that on Twitter and stuff with people's arguments and online and just in modern society anyway, that it's just one little thing people pick on and go, well, the rest of it can't be true.
And that's a fair assessment to point out. But the thing with Bob is that it's not just one thing. For me anyway, there are multiple things that are big red flags.
What's your issues then?
Well, my issues are, first of all, his schooling. That to me is up there. But then when you start really digging into the details of it, the hand scanner, for example, that hand scanner has been shown to have been in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was released 10 years before the Bob Lazar story ever came out. You've got his occupation that he had after the Bob Lazar story came out. I mean, there's no nice way to say it, but he was a pimp. He solicited women for money. And he did that. He bought the apartments, he collected the money, he hired the girls, he installed the security systems. And in the affidavit that talks about that, it doesn't seem like this is his first rodeo. It's not the first time he's done this. It seemed like a very organized thing, something that he was maybe even done a couple times. There's no way to prove that, but I mean, just based off of reading this 3-page affidavit that was written by police officers and detectives, and I come from a family of police officers and detectives. I've read court cases before. I've been in courtrooms. So I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police officer, but I'm familiar with the process. And when you read this and you come away saying, man, would the federal government hire somebody to work on crazy information like this at that kind of top secret level, with the ability to do this as a living? And in other words, have the mental capability. Because I mean, just put yourself in a pimp's shoes for a moment. What would have to happen in your life for you to be like, I think I'm going to be a pimp?
So we'll come back to the pimp stuff. Great conversation. But you know what you've just made? I was going to bring up the point, but you've kind of made it there almost for me. When you talk about, would a government want to hire someone, if you were going to profile someone like psychologically as to they have these traits, would that not be the ideal person to hire? And this gets a little bit conspiracy-ish, because you know what? This is someone who isn't totally trustworthy, but we don't want that person because this is someone who could easily be discredited down the line.
Yes.
So maybe you would want someone that you could discredit. You would want someone that has that little bit of a sinister background, or someone who has that kind of little dark secret that they don't want out.
Well, here's the thing. Can you point to another example of somebody who did the same thing, who had a similar background? As in anyone, any sort of whistleblower. I mean, if we want to call Bob Lazar, I mean, technically he would be a whistleblower, right?
But would you say then, obviously not necessarily within like ufology, but what about people who make it to high-ranking political positions and have pretty nefarious backgrounds.
No,
Like you wouldn't think that, but they get there. And do you know what? I'm not necessarily even talking about the one that everyone's going to assume I am, but you even look at like I again, I'm not political in the slightest. So American, you know, you've got your little political thing over there and it's messed up. And yes, a lot of the world is laughing at America, right? But that's a UK thing because wow, it's been a soap opera for a long time. But even go back to Obama. Like, Obama's a really clever guy, and most of the world outside of America love him, okay? However, no doubt he's had to do some things and make some decisions and make some enemies along the way to get where he has. Nice guys don't just get to that level of power. So I'm sure you could pick holes in anyone's sort of story like that.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And
that goes for any walk of life, not just politics.
You make a great point. I can't argue that point. But it's the difference between, you know, of course, there's a huge difference between President Obama and Bob Lazar. But I mean, it's the, you know, it's the, like, for example, you know, I think George had said in your interview that he thought Bob Lazar got a piece of Element 115 off the base. For me, if that's true, just based off the conversation I had with Lou Elizondo, he would have been arrested. He would have, without a doubt, been arrested if he had stolen a piece of government property on that kind of level. And I don't think that his arrest would validate his story, because the government can put whatever label they want to on that arrest, especially if somebody has a background that is as slippery as Bob Lazar, you know, because you could arrest Bob Lazar and say, yeah, we arrested him for solicitation, or we arrested him for, solicitation of government secrets, or whatever label they want to put on it that has nothing to do with UFOs or his crazy story, if that makes sense.
You could find images on his computer that have got nothing to do with anything like that suddenly discredit him, and people don't want to have anything to do with him. Doesn't mean it happened, but I just think, though, there still comes a point that, and I think this is something that Lou Elizondo, who I'm a fan of, okay, and I know other people aren't, and I believe you're a fan of him as well from the way you spoke about him and to him, right? But he's not looking for fans. He's not looking for people to believe him. He just wants people to kind of have the conversation, which is what we are doing. But when you look at Bob Lazar and getting something off of that base, forgetting whatever it might have been, you kind of assume that everyone working on that base is competent, and that there aren't some guards you could get past that are just a bit thick or weren't particularly paying attention. You just assume it's all like heavily guarded because of what may or may not have been there. And I think you've got an image in your head of what it may have looked like walking down some of those corridors. For all we know, there was a room or a hangar underground that had a craft or part of a craft. And we're going to assume in that room there's just loads of guards standing there like in the movies with guns and, you know, the hats pulled down. And then there's like doors with like, you've got to have a special card that you've got to have two people at the same time. A
scanner,
And how do we know that it's not literally simple as someone with a handle going, open that door and walk out? You just assume, and when you hear people like Lou and Chris Mellon talk about the government they worked in, and that's not the government as in one political regime, that's just all the regimes, they talk about just the compartmentalization and the inconsistencies and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of human error comes into play, and maybe he did just get something past him, maybe something fit in his pocket, maybe something fit in his bag. Like, they're no doubt for a clearly intelligent man, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here with you because you're saying, how could we do it?
Well, no, I'm playing devil's advocate too. Yeah, I'm just arguing the other side of it. And just to be clear, like, I love this story. Like, I want this to be true. I want it to be true 100%. I would also just love to see the other side of it, because I know there's a whole, like, I would love to see someone do a documentary the style of Jeremy Corbell, but really explore the other relationships that Bob Lazar had. For example, his father. I want to know, did he have any brothers or sisters? Does he have cousins? Does he have high school classmates? Does he have uncles? Does he have cousins? You know, like all of these people that interacted with him as a child. Like, there is a big part of this story I feel that is not being told. for whatever reason, whether there's no interest or whether it's just there's nothing there. I'm not really sure, but it just feels like I want to see both sides, right, as best as I can.
Could that need? I like that kind of human element to it too, but could that not then needlessly complicate or muddy the story? So let's just say he has an uncle, and I don't know this by any means, folks, right? He has an uncle, but then the uncle's got a bit of a nefarious past. The uncle's been in jail for something, or he's got some cousin who has links with someone who has a bad past or done something. And then it's, well, yeah, he's linked with this guy, and he's linked with this one, and maybe that's why that stuff doesn't get brought in. It might just be totally because it's just never been brought up. But
yeah, well, I would just like to see it investigated by, let's say, a police officer or a detective, someone who knows how to do these things, and present it like a police case, or like James Fox says, like present it as if he would, as if this was a court case. We're going to have a prosecution, we're going to have a defense, and we're going to put all of the evidence on the table, and then let the jury decide, and I just don't think, I feel like all of the evidence that has been put forth on this story has been coming from one side of it. There's never been an opposite side to this coin that has devoted the time, the energy, the effort, the productions to telling this story. I love it for a lot of reasons. First of all, it brings people into the topic. And here's the thing that I will say to defend Bob. Joe Rogan believes him. Commander David Fravor believes him. I don't know if Lou Elizondo believes him, but he has said that I know some of the things that he has talked about have rung to be true, especially when it comes to how the craft move and sort of like the description of them, how they wobble before they take off. Like that those are some things that Bob Lazar said first. So I can't take that away from him, and there are some very compelling arguments. It's just when I see a group of body language experts that have analyzed terrorists and murderers and criminals, and then they get together and they analyze years of Bob Lazar footage, interviews, and they come to the determination that there are crackles of truth in this story, but a lot of the stuff that holds those crackles of truth together, just they don't hold up. And again, it's coming from with the preface of, I want this to be true. I want this 100% to be true. So don't get it twisted. It's one of the first, if not the first, other than reading books, it's the first thing I remember seeing on television that was a big, big deal when it came to UFO, the UFO topic.
Yeah. I think with the Lazar stuff, like you say, I think there's so many elements to the story that there's certain parts of it that it only takes one of those to be true. Yeah. And then would the rest of it matter?
Right. And no, it's a good point.
If it can even come out, and I know I can see some of the comments from, I am reading the stuff as people are commenting as well. But like, if it did ever get to the point, like that George Knapp said, we might not get disclosure, but we'll have confirmation, because disclosure would then potentially incriminate people going back 70, 80, 100 years, okay?
Right.
So say we did get to a point now where they released the file on Bob Lazar and went, okay, here's actually what happened. Bob did work there. He did work in a craft. He never had what he thought he had. We let him take what he had out the office. Yes, this isn't true. He didn't go to this college. But at the end of the day, he did work in a back engineered craft. Would you necessarily care about all the other stuff? Or I suppose there's then that, but why did you lie about it? But at that point, we're talking about aliens being real. So all that stuff goes away. So it's just, like you say, it's a romantic story. It's one of those ones you go, and this is where some people times will argue on Twitter. And with stuff like this, I never usually put this into this context, but yes, I want that story to be true because that's incredible, but I'm not stupid. I don't just believe all this stuff is true because someone said it. Right. But what I do put a lot of faith in this story with is George Knapp and someone like him keeping so attached to the story for so long. And just for what it's worth regarding Lou Elizondo, I would guess that Lou knows the parts of the story that would be the good stuff. But I would presume someone like Lou, given I've spoke to him a couple of times, and this is just literally my opinion, and again, seeing him on your interview and Ryan Sprague and all that kind of stuff, he wouldn't appreciate Bob's actions afterwards.
Right.
And that would set Bob as someone that Lou wouldn't want to be associated with in any way, because he wouldn't agree with the actions and how he's gone about doing what he's been doing.
Right. Well, that's why I asked Lou that question, because I kind of wanted to, I just want to put the seriousness as to if what he did is true. That means he broke some big time national security secrets. And then if it is true, then I want to know, well, why isn't the government, why didn't they act on those national security threats or laws that were broken? It just opens up a whole can of worms. But, I wanted to encapsulize that breaking NDAs is not just, I'm going to break an NDA, it's not just a nonchalant thing that you can do. And when I hear someone had mentioned John Lear, I will bring up John Lear. John Lear said himself that the first thing Bob Lazar did when he was done with his first interview to work at S4 in Area 51, the first thing he did was get in his car and he drove to John Lear's house and they talked about the interview. A high-level security job at the most secret military base on the planet. The first thing you do is hop in your car and go tell John Lear about it. That's, to me, it just doesn't make sense. And that's out of John Lear's mouth. But again, here's the thing with this story. And I feel like it's the best way to encapsulate it. It's almost as if it's the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, right? The book. And we close this book and just put it on the shelf. And anytime we want a great story and just something to get your mind racing, we're going to pull this off the shelf and read it because it's a lot of fun. And I think you're right. I think a big linchpin in this is George Knapp and his credibility, his journalism. And I don't want to pull that into question, but he is human. People can be wrong. And I think it would be okay if I would love if he came across some information to say, hey, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe it is wrong. But if that information doesn't exist, then I can see why he's going to stick to his guns. There's no examples of George Knapp doing nefarious reporting. So why would I extend that to this story just because it's a crazy story?
And you know what? I saw it summed up really nicely on Twitter earlier regarding and George made the point, this story was reported on 30 years ago, not for a worldwide audience, not to be nitpicked and torn apart. It was a story for Las Vegas residents that was brought up on the channel because their guest dropped out and he spoke to someone and went, can I get the UFO guy in? And the UFO guy was Dennis, which became Bob Lazar, okay? And someone put on when they were questioning, all the holes in the story and the inconsistencies. If you and your partner get married and 30 years later, you're taken into separate rooms and asked to talk about the wedding day and the events that happened on your wedding day, you're both going to describe the same day, but there's going to be differences. And some of those are just things that have naturally been filled in your own mind over time. And you get things wrong and you will swear that you spoke to that person. That person wasn't there. No, but I spoke to them. Or maybe that happened at a later time. And then your partner, actually, they cut the cake, but you remember holding her hand and she says, no, you didn't. Yeah. And those little bits just happen over time. And that can just happen with this.
That's the human brain. That's a fact. That's what happens to memories. They change over time. But I did find the one thing that I found really interesting that I didn't know, or maybe I did know and just didn't really pick up on, but that George Knapp had put Bob Lazar on the air and didn't know if that story was true. Because when he said on your show, when they cut live and all of the people started rushing into his room, like the news director and all those people, they're like, is that story true? He's like, I don't know. I don't know if it's true. So like that to me, I was like, whoa, wait a second. Why would you put him on the air? That to me, I was like that I would like to know more about that,
But that's
things
it.
like that.
You forget that was a
Yeah.
local news story 30
Right.
years ago that you were
Right.
never meant to see. Me and you were never the audience for that story. We were never
Yeah.
meant to be sitting here 30 years later on a podcast talking on different sides of the world over webcams with an audience set round the world chatting in a chat room next to us. That's not what that story was for. It was almost a throwaway piece, and it just exploded and blew up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I understand that, but I feel like at some level you had to have known people outside of Nevada were going to see this. It's sensational news. It's a crazy claim. And even in 1989, it wasn't out of the realm for a local news story to go national. I mean, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's news. You're putting it out there as news. So I feel like, I don't know. I agree. I don't think there was an expected reaction. I don't think George was sitting there going, "Oh man, wait till people hear this. This is going to go all over the world. I'm going to be famous." I don't think there was any of that going on. But I do think that he knew there was going to be a little more eyeballs on this because, I mean, he noticed it in the local programming that he was doing when he was doing that show at 6 a.m. with local officials. And then he brought on John Lear and he saw, oh man, people are calling. And then he brought him on again. He's like, oh man, more people are calling. And then so by the third time he called, people were ready for that show. And so I think he knew a little bit, George is a savvy dude. He's a media guy. He's a newsman.
Yeah, but it's a sensational story. And like you said, he'd done that at the time as well because you want ratings.
Right.
There were elements he was interested in, but that's like us having this discussion, and little do we know in 30 years' time, this is going to be a seminal piece of UFO history that people are poring over going, you know what, if you actually notice, Luis Jimenez at the start of the interview describes his background, but the way he waved his hand from right to left was actually signaling the background wasn't real. And it was, people would be just picking and nitpicking and trying to find things that may or may not be there.
Let me ask you this. Do you have Netflix?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite murder mystery thing that's on there right now? Have you seen any of these newer ones? There was one about the Berkshire Ripper.
I don't really watch them. I hear loads of in the UK. The big thing just now is people watching murder mystery stuff and they love it. I just don't get involved. I see the comments, and there's one about, is it the Cecil Hotel that's quite big?
That one is really good. And there's also another one about if there's one I would recommend, I would just so you can see an idea of how I would like this to be explored from a either a television or film perspective. It was a series about the Night Stalker, and it was literally, you are hopping in to this room of detectives and they are walking you through step by step of every single murder that this maniac did and all of the clues that they went through. And it was just as if you were along for the ride for this. I think it was like 8 episodes or something like that. And this event happened 30, 40 years ago, and it was horrific. And for me, the way they tell these stories and these events with these memories, I think would be I would love just take out the Night Stalker and plop in Bob Lazar. Yeah. And I would love to see like detectives, real investigators, like what's his name from the 411, the missing 411 series. His name's slipping my brain, but that is a phenomenal documentary series.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I would just want to see that. I don't think anyone has seen anything like that yet when it comes to that story. So I just want to see the devil's advocate perspective, because I think anyone who hears this story wants to believe it. I just wish, we would all go into it with a sort of tapping the brakes as we go, slowly going through this fun tunnel. But we also want to make sure that when we come out the other end, that we're all more knowledgeable about what we're looking at, what we're talking about. And like up until a year ago, I was an avid Bob Bob Lazar's believer. And then I started this show, and then I really started researching, because I'm trying to fill content. I'm trying to do things. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, man. So I went back and I watched the Jeremy Corbell film again. Then I watched it again, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, man, something doesn't feel right. So it's not that I don't want to believe it. I just want to have a rational conversation about it. And that's why I want to have people like you on the show, because I think if we could show people that, hey, I have this position of, I think this is mostly true, and I'm not going to put this on the table and say, this is my evidence. But and then you've got your side that says, well, I don't think this is mostly true. And I'm not using this as evidence either, but hey, let's find the common ground here in the middle and move forward on that. Because I love talking about this, but I also don't like pissing off half my audience, and but I don't want to offend anybody. I just want to have the conversation. So thank you for just like entertaining me here for a couple minutes on.
No, I love that. I love it.
Yeah. So is there anything else that we could talk about when it comes to this case or this man?
So I don't know if it segues into anything, but the reason I like your idea of having that show that goes to have a serious look at the background and the claims, and almost for part of it take away the UFO alien aspect of it and look at the guy's life and his place of work and the clearances he may or may not have had. But what you need, I think, is that next level of public interest that isn't there yet in this subject. Where the interest sits with this subject still at a peak is the Bob Lazar documentary on Netflix still has to have Bob Lazar and flying saucers and a big picture of the desert and an alien spaceship.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does.
It's not there.
I disagree. I don't think you need flying saucer. I think, honestly, I would love to see a television show that explores what is the truth of this, almost like a Breaking Bad, where like maybe we get an episode of it's a complete lie and this is how the government fabricated it. And then maybe we get an episode of how this is actually true and it happened. And there's an ambiguous ending where we still don't find out the truth at the end of this television show. But like, I think if you shoot it,
Can I just say why there's a few reasons that I don't think that's there? Because let's forget the TTSA stuff and what's happened, right? Look at unidentified. Putting it really, really basically, there is the guy who ran the US government's UFO program, not in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. This guy done it 8 years ago, right? Is on TV showing us videos of what the US government consider UFOs. It didn't get 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 million people watching it. It got a couple of million. It got the UFO audience interested. In the UK, I'm guessing, I think it got maybe 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people watching it. At most. That's not a mainstream audience. That's the people interested. And what you're getting is then little drips and drabs that have saw him on Tucker Carlson and Fox News coming on board. And then little bits that have saw him on some late night BBC, or Sky News website clip. That audience, I just don't think is there yet either. Even the phenomenon documentary is phenomenal, right? There's a good word for it. It's amazing and it's perfect. Oh, Dave Partridge is in. I need to say hi to Dave. Sorry, Shadows Magazine. And it's perfect to show anyone, even skeptics or people who are total non-believers in the subject, for this subject. But again, it's still not. It came and it's gone out the charts. There's no crest of a wave. It comes and it goes. And like I recorded a podcast with Dan on this, and I said at the time, for me, the phenomenon, the impact it could have hasn't been had yet. I think it had the impact for us and the community. And I think you've got people like Lou, Chris, Harry Reid, those kind of people involved, Joe Rogan going, yeah, we like this. And it opened up the door a little bit. That for me is something I hope in a couple of years, as we find out more, people go back to that and go, okay, the public are really interested. Watch this documentary.
Yeah.
It came out 4 years ago.
You make a good point. I mean, look, I agree with you. That Jeremy Corbell film was a much more cultural impact than the phenomenon. You can't argue that. And you're right. It's because it's a sensational story. It's got UFOs on the cover. As you were saying that, I'm like, yeah, he's absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. Maybe there isn't an audience for the other end of this.
Yeah,
but I'd still like to see someone try.
absolutely.
I think there's, with a small budget, you can get you can get it on Netflix. You get some eyeballs on it. I don't know if because when I started looking at this information as a believer, as someone who took the story for truth, when I started seeing the things that started to break down that belief system, it was really hard for me to consume it. Like, I had to stop it, get angry, and then come back to it. And I don't think a lot of people have that discipline or patience to do that. I think if it goes against something they believe, they immediately shut it off and push it to the side because they don't want to challenge their belief systems. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, that's why more people watch Ancient Aliens than the Phenomenon documentary.
You make a good point, man.
Unfortunately,
you make a good point.
That's I'm going to say unfortunately, but they do.
Yeah, you kind of just deflated my balloon there, but thank you. But this is no. These are the nuggets that I always strive for, man. No, you changed my mind based off of new information. It is happening right before your eyes. Yeah. It kills me because
I hate that, and I hate that. By the way, and that's not to say I'm right, but that's just the way I see it, and yeah, unfortunately.
Well, let's talk about Unidentified, these 2 seasons, because I think that show and the phenomenon, if I was to start a college course, those would be the things I would start with. That would be the curriculum, those 2 entities of media. The things that were I just don't understand. There are more sensational stories in the 2 seasons of that show that are just as verifiable, just as reputable. The witnesses are just as credible as anything that came out in that New York Times story, if not more in some cases.
Yeah.
And nobody paid attention to it.
People did, but it was the UFO community. And,
right. Outside of that,
even we were split on. Do you know what? It was something that came up in that, and I was really excited because in my head I was like, great, we're going to get military and pilots, like commercial pilots and police officers, and we're going to get like these people that are respected and aren't normally involved in this subject publicly to talk about it, and that would get people involved. And I was amazed at the backlash on that and the amount of people who were commenting that just because they're a pilot doesn't mean they should be listened to any more than, Joe down the road. And for me, I'm sorry, that is why we should listen to them more. Because and I hate to bring up Mick West every time I speak, but that's why these people are trained to do a job. Yes, people make mistakes, but don't tell me because you stand outside with soap on a rope over your koi pond, swinging something round with a GoPro, that is the same as what these pilots are, encountering at a distance. They can tell what something is or isn't. And again, there's all that data in the background as well that we don't get to see. And people can do the whole thing of, but if we can't see it, then but do you know what? It still doesn't mean it was a flock of geese.
Right. Yeah. Just at least admit that you don't have all the data, and yes, that it could be anomalous. Don't keep pushing this narrative of, oh, it was a jet, or oh, it was a drone, or I don't know. I look, Mick West is important. I think sometimes he brings up some great points and he does great work. But I don't think anyone that speaks about this topic is as good at their job or as well trained as they're doing their job as Commander David Fravor. He is the top 0.001% of what he does for a living. No one on the planet Earth has gone through more training to do what he does than that man, including Mick West. And that was my question for Mick. Has there been any level of training that has come close compared to what that man has been through? You know,
I think he was involved in getting some of the physics right in the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game, and I think Dave Partridge will appreciate me bringing that up because he likes to regularly. And that's not a dig at someone who designed video games, but
no, I mean he's I always love listening to him just because sometimes he does make great points, and he kind of messes with the Twitter community, and I think it's funny. I think he's a funny troll.
And so do I. Listen, Luis, I'm probably going to try and speak to Mick on the podcast later on this year when the time's right as well, okay? But it's still the same as me watching someone perform open heart surgery. And I've got a rough idea. If you gave me a scalpel and said, Andy, you have to perform this open heart surgery, I have no idea where to start. But do you know what? I've got a rough idea to where to start cutting. But then a real surgeon comes along and says, no, don't cut there. Cut over here. Now, I thought I should cut there, but do you know what? That person knows better than me, so I'm going to do what they tell me. What Mick does is go, but you could cut here, and it's probably going to be fine as well.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Or he does the equivalent of, I'm an expert on this topic because I read a couple of books about gimbals, gimbal camera systems.
Listen, no one can tell me that that's not rotating.
Yeah.
I do not care what anyone tries to explain to me. And this is where I will rarely dig my feet in. Talk about glare rotating. That background and that object does not stay the same as it turns. It definitely rotates. So I don't care what anyone says.
Well, I agree. I didn't agree with his assessment, and Lou Elizondo caught on to exactly what he meant, and it took me a second to realize what exactly he meant by that. And I loved how he was almost a little frustrated at Lou for not understanding immediately. Like, you're talking about a complex camera system moving with a jet as it's moving this way. Like, give the man a second to sort of catch up to the concept you're talking about. But even with all of that, it's almost as if you're going out of your way to really explain what's going on here. Why you never answer the question, why would the government call this unexplained? Why would they classify it as that? What's the motivation of doing that if that's not what it is?
And the fact the pilot who was looking at it said it's rotating, and the fact that there was more than just that one, and the fact that video isn't the video, that video is a clip from the video. That video starts before that point. That video finishes after the point it cuts off. There are longer videos.
Well, have you seen him give an explanation on that Aguadilla video yet?
I get a little bit confused. This is where David will come in handy.
Yeah.
Is the Agadir one? You pronounce it better than me.
Yeah.
Is that the one that splits off?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know someone was getting in touch with me on my Twitter DMs over that one, and they'd done a lot of work that I did not understand. Okay, but they essentially gave why this probably was like a balloon. And the separation and the movement and what it looks like it's doing it's not traveling as fast as you think it's traveling, and that it probably was like a balloon that separates. And they came up with these incredible diagrams and everything as well. And I sent it to Dan because I was like, Dan, like I said, I am not a details guy.
Right.
I was like, do you know what? You're showing me all this work and data as a skeptic and someone kind of debunking that particular case and showing me why they reckon it is what it is. And I can't say that that's not right. I'm not saying it's an alien spaceship halving and, separating, but that what this guy put together, I was like, do you know what? Fair enough. That looks good, but I don't know that it's right. Just because it looks complex and I don't understand it doesn't mean it's correct. So I sent it on to Dan and that to look at as well, but it's a hard one. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's I just always go to, well, why would a customs plane with a crazy piece of equipment at the tip of the nose follow a balloon like that? Like why would pilots train? I mean, maybe for a minute or two because they think it's weird, but once they, I mean, how did they not figure out that was a balloon? And I'm not saying it's out of the realm. I mean,
no, that's it. But you would need to know more, and we don't. And that's where we're doing the opposite now of what we were doing on the other previous cases, where you would have to see more data and have more context. What you need is a pilot to go on record and say, listen, I can tell you it wasn't a balloon because we had this data coming in and we had this set of eyes on it who followed it do this.
Yeah.
But then you're still having to just take their word for it because that sort of data is not going to get released. And that's, again, where this whole field falls apart at times as well.
Right, just not enough data. There's not enough data to prove it. There's not enough data to disprove it, and we always have to remind ourselves of that. What was your favorite thing that was revealed in either season 1 or 2 of Unidentified? Can you remember one particular story or case or anything that sticks out in your mind where you're like, Jesus?
Yeah. So favorite story, but favorite moment, two different things. The favorite story was, or part of a story, is the fact that those objects were traced. They came in from the atmosphere and they were tracked by other organizations coming in from the atmosphere, not just the Nimitz Princeton. It was 7 to 10 days. It wasn't one incident, but then they also followed them going off towards Catalina Islands, and it seems that those objects then went underwater at that point as well.
Yeah.
So it was the fact that it wasn't just, Fravor had that incident. The whole fact that they came in, they were there for 7 to 10 days, they hovered about, just watching, and then they had, that moment with Fravor, and then they seem to have went underwater as well. So all that getting added to the story. And the fact is, that was put together the way it was, and they kept telling you about, these fishermen keep seeing these things in the water, the water. They kept telling you. And, when a guy like Lou Elizondo says, I can't tell you much, but you need to look at the data. The guys literally helped put together a documentary where every episode they keep telling you about the water. Okay, so there was one thing. But then the best moment in both series for me was the David Marler episode, the Black Triangles in season 2, when Chris Mellon, who I love when he talks because he does it so rarely, you have to listen when he's on. He's even more elusive than Lou can be.
Yeah.
Oh, he is more elusive than Lou. I mean, you try and get an interview with Chris Mellon,
It's like, well, the way I was explained, it was like, imagine you're playing a 3-dimensional chessboard and Chris Mellon is the queen. You're not even on the 5th. You're not even a piece on the board.
It's almost that unreachable. You never know though. But like Chris Mellon talking about the Black Triangles, and when he talks to David Marler, David Marler's talking to him, and the camera sits on Chris for a few seconds, and he's just got this look where this is a guy who knows so much more than he can say, and he almost you can see he wants to almost tell David, and he has that moment where he says, do you know what I think these black triangles are doing? I think they're surveying the earth and mapping the earth. Mm-hmm. He's not just saying that because he thinks that might sound good. That's something that he, in my opinion, I suppose I have to say that, he knows that to probably be the case, that these objects, when these black triangles aren't ours, are surveying our planet for some reason. And that's why Dan talked about it as well. And we mentioned this to Lou off air. This wasn't part of my podcast, but the fact that some of these objects have been seen, transmedium travel through physical solids, actually going into mountains or rock, and coming back out. So yeah, when Chris Mellon's talking about these things surveying the planet, you've got to look at why, what are they looking for, what are they looking at? Are they looking for something? So for me, that was a huge standout moment when Chris said that.
Yeah. Well, just to touch on the triangle episode, I think my favorite part of that episode was Michael Villa, who was a cryptologic something. He spoke, I think, 7 languages. Farsi was one of them, and he looked dead in the camera, and he's like, listen, and his education is just second to none. West Point grad, if I'm not mistaken. He looks dead in the camera, and he's like, I saw a craft flying from the back of the boat to the front of the boat, a triangle shape over the most secured airspace on the planet in an active theater of war. I don't give a damn what you believe. Like, that's what I saw. And I mean, just his face, I was like, Jesus, that is insane. Like I've had firsthand conversations with F-16 fighter pilots that have chased these things. For me, that's good enough. That's good enough when you have that, when you're sitting right in front of them and they're telling you this story. I think another thing, one thing that Stephen Bassett pointed out on he just did a show, and he's going to be on the show next week, helping us.
He's coming on mine in a few weeks.
Yeah, he's helping us specifically with the big phone home and how to organize and sort of and I've been spending this last week putting together a list of every single congressman and senator that serve on one of 6 committees having to do either loosely or very closely with the UAP topic. And so this next week, I'm going to be reaching out to them by phone and by Twitter accounts just to basically give them the heads up that we're doing this, because according to Stephen Bassett, we want to give them a warning and a heads up. If you're going to do this, we don't want to piss anybody off, because in his opinion, we're winning. Like, this is a war that we are already winning. And so to call and make demands and be argumentative about it, or flood Congress with all of these phone calls during a weekday, he thinks might hurt the movement as opposed to helping it. So we're going to have a discussion on possibly moving it 2 days earlier to a weekend. So I think filling up voicemail boxes is also very productive, because when they come in on Monday and they start having to go through all of these voicemails, I think it'll be a little less aggressive, if that makes sense.
Absolutely,
and also I think he made another great point that, God forbid if there's a social unrest, like a Black Lives Matter event or something like that, where people are calling into Congress with legitimate anger, you don't want to be flooding up those phone lines with your UAP phone calls, So I think we're gonna play it safe and move it to a weekend date, and it's perfect because it'll line up perfectly with the Lonnie Zamora anniversary. Just happens to be. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, it took me a week to put this list together. There's all 50 states, senators, their phone numbers, their Twitter handles. So when you do call Congress or you do help me on this event, you've got a list that you can go off of. You don't have to go looking for things. So going back to what Stephen Bassett was saying, he pointed out that at the end of season 2 at Unidentified, the closing statements for the show, and the name of the episode was Contact, and he just made a very beautiful. He's like, and I don't have the transcript right here in front of me, and it's something I think that I should invest in and hang on the wall, because the quotes that come out of both Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon solidify for me that these are not government insiders trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes. These guys don't have any intentions or malintents or hidden agendas. It is a confession from both of them as to what we're dealing with here, or possibly dealing with here, and to prepare the human race to be open to consuming this information and be ready because it's coming, kind of, confession. That to me was just like, oh my God, yeah, man, I had to go back and watch that and really just digest it. But yeah, I mean, I think those are like probably my 2 favorite moments out of that, and the Italian helicopter that got shot with some beam or something in season 1, where they showed the damage from the Italian helicopter. The Italian Air Force had been shot at by a UFO, and they had the pictures of the damage, and the Italian Air Force going, yeah, this is what happened. So that, to me, I mean, I always recommend, if you've only watched that show once, go back and do yourself a favor and rewatch it, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I think will answer a lot of questions, that people might have as to what we possibly dealing with, because there's a lot of hints. I mean, what do you think?
What about what we're dealing with, or
just how that show is sort of not telling you what it is, but almost pointing you in a direction. It feels like, hey, we don't know what this is, but just pay attention to the ocean. Like you said, pay attention to that. These things can travel through air, space, and water with impunity, without any struggle whatsoever. And pay attention to that. These things are coming from the sky and coming down, So
yeah. And and for me, it's not even the fact it's the show; it's who is putting their name to the show, and that Lou and Chris are going along with what's being said. This is the message that they want put out there. And just hi Dan, for Dan's joined the chat as well. So and my favorite bit about the Italian helicopter case is when they're talking about, and it starts to go a little bit almost sci-fi-ish. You have to forget you're watching a serious documentary. Is when they say that they have worked out that they can use a frequency, and they can almost they can get in touch with these objects to let them know that they know you're there. We know you're there. And that they can only fire, and he says, I think the line is, they can only fire their weapons when they're not in their cloaking mode.
Yes.
And they're literally talking about these things can turn invisible, and then they can fire weapons when they're there. And that's something that's probably massively overlooked as well. But
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of nuggets like that in this show where you're just like, whoa, what the hell was that? Like, I found it shocking that the United States military would allow a television program to divulge the capabilities of that radar system that was part of the Nimitz carrier group. When they talk about how this radar system on this ship has the capability of producing a three-dimensional battlefield, number one, but number two, it has the capability of tracking an object the size of a baseball 60,000 feet in the sky. Yeah. That was the first episode. When I heard that, I'm like, whoa, what? I mean, this is awesome. Like, where else do you get little nuggets of info like that?
Do you know what all that says to me? It's actually not the fact all that's really interesting and incredible technology. It just goes to show how much better the technology they actually have is that they aren't telling you about. Mm-hmm. That is the more up-to-date stuff on these systems.
Yeah. Well, that was 2005, that radar system.
Yeah, Gary Voorhees talks about the Spy 1 radar being, he was one of the last people trained to use that because it was such an old and outdated system. And I'm by no means an expert in all that, military talk and the systems and the technical side of it, but that there is far better systems now in place. And you think that was 17 years ago.
Right.
And it's a case that we talk about as being so modern, but when you go back, like people still talk about, Lazar 30 years, Roswell getting on 75, 80 years.
Right.
And it's like, here's one that we've got the people who are still in active duty, people who are in really high ranking positions now, or you've got your Commander Fravors, Sean Cahill, Gary Voorhees, Kevin Day, PG Hughes, all these guys coming out and having these conversations as well. It's incredible that we've got this. And it's all, and me and Dan talk about this quite a lot, that I don't think we totally appreciate the volume and the quality of information and data that we do have, because we're in the Twitter bubble and the Twitter generation where there's so much that, because there's not something new happening every single day, it's amazing that we can have slow news days. It's amazing, Luis, that you can do 2 or 3 shows a week because the content's there. If you go back 15, 20, 30 years ago, there was something maybe every couple of years out with a very, very small community that wasn't that well connected.
Yeah, and really past that, all you had was Coast to Coast AM.
Yeah.
That was it. That was it. That's all you had was Art Bell at 10 o'clock at night, going to midnight. Like it was, you're right, man. I mean, and just going back to what Stephen Bassett says, we're winning. Like, we're winning. This is going to happen. But I'm curious to know, what do you think? Because you had mentioned Lazar and Roswell and sort of the space in between those two events. Do you think this 2017 event, we'll just call it an event or article or whatever, do you think that is another event that happens and we get stonewall for another 20, 30 years and maybe these guys die before another nugget of information drops like that? Or do you think this is a different circumstance? I mean, I think you kind of already answered this question just by the content that you had just described, or do you think that this is the opening of the can and now everything is starting to come out?
I think with the New York Times article in 2017, I think ufology, there was a fork in the road. Mm-hmm. And I think the old school ufology, which I do love, and there's still a massive place for it, and people that have been involved in the subject for a long time, that went one way. And I think a lot of us wanted to go this new way with, let's be honest, Louis Elizondo at the front of it at the time with TTSA, saying, look, we can try this route. And part of it is that threat narrative, which people don't like. But I think Lou's explained enough times now that he's not talking about these things are coming to attack us. It's talking about the potential threat, and you can't deny that would be there.
Right.
And people like myself, and I won't speak for you, Luis, but, you know, like Dan and Dave and stuff we talk about, it's opened up a whole new platform for the subject. It's changed the conversation. It's on Fox News. It's on History Channel, on serious documentaries. But like I say, still not getting the same numbers as Ancient Aliens. But it's got a new tone. And what it's achieved in 3 years is whatever happens, we're going to get a UAP task force report. We never got that in the 75 years beforehand. Nothing that wasn't set up to fail. Like if you go back to like Blue Book, where it was find explanations for this. But then let's play devil's advocate. We don't know that's not happening in the background with a task force now, where we're going to get something really, really watered down. But again, you just have to trust in people like Knapp and Lou and Chris Mellon, who are saying, look, this is in good hands. We're making progress. You're saying yourself, Louise, this is a war we are winning. I think it's another small step forward on a road that we're going to keep going down.
What would you, I mean, Lou Elizondo put forth this question, and I thought it was a fantastic question. What would you like to see? What would be the number one thing you'd like to see come out of this 180-day report? If you can have it, if it was a wish list,
a best guess assessment. I want to see 5 bullet points, what this could be.
A hypothesis.
Yeah. I just want one of them to say otherworldly /ET /dimensional. I don't care if the other ones say secret Russian tech, secret Chinese tech, secret Jamaican tech, secret Scottish tech. I just want one of those bullet points to suggest or at least acknowledge this could be not from here. Not human. I don't care what it says, just not human.
Yeah.
That just that to be there as an option. And I think what that then opens up is the next report, because I can see this being the first, and I hope the task force sticks around. But then potentially, do we then get more mainstream scientists involved that say, you know what, let's have a look at this, let's discuss it, let's study it. You know, that's what I want to see. I want to see that movement forward. I've seen some people put in the chat earlier on, and they're right. We are not going to get anything that says that this is aliens. We are not going to get, okay, we've got 9 craft kept in a hangar somewhere. Okay, we've got some bodies. That's not going to be here, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, my lights went off. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I agree. I don't think we're going to be getting that either. I would like to see a commitment, a yearly commitment from our government. You know, almost like a yearly report. Every year we get new data points, and every year the data points get better. You know,
do you know what? I don't want to see that. I want to see I want to see my government do the next report, and then I want to see another government do the next report.
Yeah,
and then I want to see another government do the next report. That for me is even better progress. That more people get involved.
Well, don't you think though, if the United States is the first one to do a report like that, a yearly report, that a UK wouldn't follow step, or at least consider it, or an India or Russia? You know, I think. What do you think? Is that like?
Potentially, just because the states do something first doesn't mean it's a good idea for the rest of the world to do it.
No, of course not.
Yeah, we see that with a lot of things, but I think the UK traditionally follows the lead of the US in most things. I think for the US being the superpower that it is, to take the lead would be interesting. I would love to see Russia and China do the same. I think you've got a lot less chance of that happening though, because of the way those nations are. But I think it would be a huge step, and at least show other countries that, do you know what, we can talk about this. It can go through Senate. High ranking like Rubio and Warner, those politicians that started the ball rolling. Harry Reid, right back from the start, has been a huge advocate. Just have the conversation. It's okay to talk about this. You don't have to say aliens. You never have to say spaceship. You have to talk about, objects, craft. You can talk about the military. That's the whole thing that Loon have tried to get across in this, with the military threat that gets talked about and the military perspective. It's easier for those politicians and those people to digest that language. And that's something they can actually justify when it comes to budgets and finances and the military. And I think you mentioned earlier on, Luis, when you talked about jamming the phone lines potentially when there's other things going on. The UK, we've got COVID. There is going to be zero appetite for that conversation right now in the UK until the COVID situation clears up. Because over here, no one wants to talk about aliens and spaceships while people are dying and there's the healthcare system and whatever you think of COVID, it's the number one topic worldwide. Yeah. So until that goes, it's great to get what you're doing, and like you say with the dates and stuff, that's a really good idea. It's getting it noticed. But there's no point in any kind of aggressive movement. There's no point in storming Parliament, because it's not the time for that. But it is the time to get behind the momentum of like the task force report over there in the US. It's just something else, and it gets more eyes and more attention on what's happening. I think so anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm interested to see what Stephen Bass said, because I do have a question for him. Is there any way for international people of interest to call in to the United States? I mean, is there a place where they could call and say, hey, I would love for the United States to take on this initiative, even though I'm not a resident or a citizen, I'd love to give you my 2 cents on it. Because if there is, I'd like to know, so that way you guys could call and participate in this day on this side if you wanted to. Yeah. And I'm curious to know if there's anything also on the UK side of things as well. If there's would it be
like an embassy,
like an embassy? Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Would you guys call our embassy? Would you call there? I wonder if I called the UK embassy here in the United States and you called the US embassy over there. It's curious. I'm going to ask him, because I think that's a question that, because I think it any voice that can try and convince this side of things to be more transparent with the information is a good thing. And we haven't gotten these bullet points yet, or the exact things, the phrasing of what we want to ask for from anyone yet. And we may not get it, who knows, but hopefully we do. And that, when we call in, it's a focused effort. But even if it's just you calling, asking for more transparency with no bullet points, that is also a big win. Or even just reaching out to them. I think what I'm going to start here in a week, I hope, getting volunteers on UFO Twitter to reach out to a number of congressmen every day. So that way we can warn them, hey, have you heard of the big phone home? It's on this date. We're going to be calling Congress to do this. Hope you'll join us. If you have any questions, hit us back. And if a congressman gets 15 tweets all having to do with the hashtag big phone home, I think we're going to get a response. And who knows, maybe according to Stephen Bassett, it's a very low risk, high reward maneuver, where we might be able to convince some of these congressmen to come on the show that day and talk about, why they think it's a good idea to pressure our government to do something like this.
Luis, can I just say, do you know what? Like, I went on a military podcast based here in the UK, and the guy's a former SAS sniper, okay? And he wanted to talk about UFOs because he's got an interest in the topic. So went on, had a really serious discussion, talked about all those different events that we have talked about, and kept it really high level for the people that would be interested necessarily in that topic. And my whole thing was, and I said to him beforehand, do you know what? At the end of this, if one of your listeners who didn't have an interest in the subject before gets involved, then for me, that's a win. And I had people getting in touch saying they went and watched the phenomenon. They'd watched Bob Lazaro on Netflix. They'd listened to the podcast. And then that's someone that listens to my podcast, that finds your podcast, and they get involved in the subject. Right. See, with a big phone home, for me, and it's your baby, and it's it's going to have an impact for everyone, and that's why you're doing it. It's really selfless. If you just get, of all that stuff that happens, if you managed to get 1 million people to make phone calls, and if just one congressman at the end of that day sits back in his chair and goes, and the following morning, walking through the halls of Congress, turns round to another congressman and says, yesterday I had 1,000 phone calls. I mean, UFO stuff. Have you heard much about this? For me, that's a win. You've started a conversation that wasn't going to happen, and so much more than that could. But it could be something as simple as that. That the next briefing that goes on, there's someone else there that wasn't there before. There's two other people set. Even if someone sends an aid or however that works, I'm not going to go in, but could you go in for me and just listen to what happens in that? That's what potentially could happen off the back of this, and you never know how that snowball picks up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea, man. That's the idea. That's the dream. Of course, managing expectations for this first one is going to be key. But I think if the right people lend their voices to it and we talk about it enough, especially in the last 2 weeks, I think we can raise some eyebrows. And maybe, I compared the UAP discussion to it being very similar to the marijuana discussion that was being had in this country for the last 25 years now. And the discussion was, well, should we legalize this? And in the last 25 years, it's gone from there's no way in hell to the most conservative states in the union now are legalizing it. Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, these countries are considering it, Texas. Like these are some very conservative places. And the thing that changed them was, of course, all of the phone calls, the emails, the harassment from people who demanded it. But it also was the money. They see that, oh, wait a second, the state of California just took in how much in taxes on the legalization of marijuana? If there is somehow a way we can tax the UFO phenomena, get people to pay a tax on it, maybe the conversation will switch really fast. But I think it's playing. I think the biggest thing is we want to play to people's curiosity.
Yeah. And
just have them have the ability to have an open mind to just even ask the question, I think is a big win. And because these senators, I think part of them, for some of them, maybe it might be a welcome break to talk about something that's not COVID or race related or just horrific, that they have to talk about and deal with constantly. If they could take a 5 or 10 minute break away from their day to talk about, a fun subject like UFOs and possible alien life, why not? Let's do it. Especially if the Navy, the Department of Defense, and the Pentagon are taking it seriously, why can't you have a conversation about it? So yeah, man, there's going to be a lot of action that happens here in the next 2 weeks on this event. And I think it's going to start to get more crystallized. And there's conversations that you and I are having with other folks behind the scenes that are adding their effort and their voices and their expertise to how we're going to accomplish this. And so I want to thank you on that. I just thank you to all of you guys over there for just the interest and the willingness to help, to help and write about it. And, in the magazine, talk about it on your podcast, use the hashtag when you tweet, like all of those things are so important. And, the biggest thing about this movement, and maybe I came into this incredibly naive because I don't know the UFO community as well as a lot of folks that I talk to or interact with. I want us to start doing less of this, pointing at each other and arguing, and start doing more of this, pointing up and demanding, and that's what it's all about. And so I just wanted to thank you and for lending your voice to the effort.
No, happy to. And like I say, when it comes to UAP Media UK, Dan, Dave, and Adam do the hard work. I just come along now and again and say, have I done that thing yet I'm meant to do? And they say no, and then I get chased up to do it. So if it helps me that I can retweet or, like a post or talk about it on the podcast or anything like that, and it gets a few more ears or eyes on it, then I'm more than happy to do that, because it's a really good idea as well.
Yeah.
It's different.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
But it's different, and it's funny. Like when you were talking before, I was thinking you're talking about Congress and people getting interested. There's a lot of maybe young and up and coming politicians that when you've got a day job and a new project comes in, and you're told that if you want to work on this, it could lead to other opportunities, and maybe there'll be a little bit of budget for it, and it's a chance to get yourself noticed. this could be the next topic in politics, that, you know what, you're not the UFO guys anymore, but this could be something they could pick up a ball with and run, that becomes a bigger department, a bigger budget, bigger funding, and people could really make their name with this and be very, very popular characters. I mean, people could end up going down in the history books, depending on what happens, and you just maybe need one or two of those politicians to get on board, and you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, it's going to be what is going to be the spark, and it's going to have to be a really savvy politician, somebody who can sort of see, not into the future, but can see trends. This is trending toward. This is going to be a bigger chunk of our news stream very soon. I think, it's trending up in that direction. So if you could get a politician to say to himself, okay, at first this might be a little humiliating, but I know that the long game, this is going to be galvanizing for me, because I'm going to be the first politician on the map to openly argue for this, and
can I ask you your opinion on something, Luis?
Go for it.
Do you think having a relatively hip and trendy, which is not a hip or trendy phrase to use, but a hip and trendy vice president like Kamala Harris helps the subject?
Man, no. I think if she had, I've never heard her speak about it. I've only heard her say something along the lines of that she's seen the report. She's on my list of people to get in contact with. I think if she lended her voice, it wouldn't hurt. I just don't think as Kamala Harris, as a person, a political figure that people actively follow as much as it seems like they do. I mean, look, she finished, I think, 7th or 8th place in the presidential race. She got 0.02% of the vote. But I think if she picked up this torch, I think it's something politically that, if she was smart about it, I think it's something that could elevate her popularity with a younger demographic. But again, I don't think, it's sort of going back to the issues that you were talking about with COVID in the United States is, not only is it COVID, but it's, kids who can't pay their student debt. It's, it's single mothers who are paying, working 3 jobs and they can barely afford ends meet. It's a majority of Americans being, one catastrophe away from being kicked out of their home. One financial catastrophe, whether it be, somebody gets sick or whatever. So those are like the forefront of those things. So I find it really hard to believe. And what's funny is Hillary Clinton was almost this politician. I feel like if she had won the race, I think we'd be having a completely different conversation today, because your chief of staff would have probably been John Podesta, and John Podesta worked for the Clintons when Bill was in office. And he, as you know, with the WikiLeaks and the work that he did with Tom DeLonge and the emails that, from Tom DeLonge, just to see an email from Tom DeLonge with John Podesta and Hillary Clinton in the CC, it's just like, it's crazy. But I think the conversation would have been completely different today. I think we would have had maybe congressional hearings on this topic by now, which is something I think should be at the top of the list of maybe asks, at least according to Stephen Bassett, is we should demand congressional hearings. We want to hear testimony from the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the UAPTF task force. We want to hear from the heads of those departments, and we want to hear senators and congressmen ask them those questions. And we want to put it on public television, so that way this conversation could go. I think public hearings would be a big win on the forefront of this topic. If we can just have questions being thrown at high level ranking government officials as to what the hell these things are that are floating above our nuclear military facilities, how are they going to answer that question?
Do you know what I hope happens? Like, to use, the guys are going to laugh in this, but I like my analogies, okay? Do you remember when Bob Geldof was trying to set up Live Aid? And Bob Geldof reached out to, if anyone knows this story, sorry for telling it, but Bob Geldof reached out to Queen and Wham and, George Michael and all these, and they all said no.
Yep.
No one wanted to do it. So what Bob Geldof done was start to lie. And Bob Geldof rang these people back up and said, look, I just want to check, Queen, you don't want to do it, but George Michael has just signed on.
Yeah.
And Queen were like, if he's doing it, then I want to get involved.
Yeah.
And just through a sense of ego and pride and not wanting to miss out, they all jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
And it just takes, if Lou is that Bob Geldof character, then maybe we just need that one politician to really get on board. And maybe it's Rubio. Maybe that's happened already and we're seeing the effects in the background.
Yeah.
And then everyone just comes back on board with it.
Well, I mean,
for me.
Ideally, that's, that would be what the big phone home sort of does. If we can get a Marco Rubio, if we can get a Dan Crenshaw or, a Kamala Harris or any one of these politicians that come on the same day, and you've got the legitimacy and the credibility of a Lou Elizondo and a Sean Cahill and Gary Voorhees and Jeremy McGowan and all of these ex-military patriots, I think we got to sell it as this is the patriotic thing to do.
Yeah.
You don't want to let down these veterans with all, are you calling them veterans liars? Are these veterans liars? Is that what we're calling veterans liars now in America? It's almost like a PR move. It's got to be sold as we're doing this for the good of veterans. We're doing this for the good of humanity. We're doing this for the good of transparency. We're doing this for the good of science.
Yeah.
We're doing this for the good of inspiration. There's got to be, and I think if you get more senators, more congressmen, more public officials, to me, the big phone home, yes, of course, we're going to have this one event in less than 7 weeks, almost 6 weeks come Monday. But for me, I think about it 10 years from now, what this could be 10 years. That for me, this is a long road. I don't expect a lot from this first one because it's so much to put together and organize in less than 3 months, but we're going to give it our best effort. And then this way, come year 2, we're ready. We're ready to go. And we know exactly what the game plan is going to be. And because we've already made the mistakes on the first one. And then guess what? Year 3 is going to be even better because now we're going to learn from the mistakes of year 1. So that way, when we get to year 10, this is a well-oiled machine that does this every single year. And every year it's going to be more people and more people are going to get on this train because the information is coming. And the more it comes, the more it's going to draw, that soccer mom or that, that busy Wall Street executive or CEO or billionaire that can say, you know what, this is worth putting some money into. Let me give $1 billion to Avi Loeb and Harvard and say, I want to study on this. And you're not going to get this $1 billion unless Avi Loeb is the head of it, so that way there's no firing anybody, and the money's used in the proper ways. It's coming. And I think, and I say this to every guest on my show, I think you especially, and this channel especially we've hopped on this train and we got the best seats before anybody else even showed up to the train. And we're going to get smacked with this wonderful information first. And then people are going to look to us to decipher this information and say, okay, is it credible? Is it worthy looking at, according to this scientist or this person? Yes, we should continue with this, or no, this data is not, it doesn't confirm any of the things we thought. It's completely different. So that's the idea. That's the plan. I'm just going on. I'm just talking now.
No, I like it though, and if that wave does happen and we get people on board, I'll have to get Dan to start adding subtitles underneath me as more and more people get on board and want to potentially listen. Yeah. But it's that audience that you want more people to get involved and just ask you. So listen, this UFO stuff, what is actually happening? Yeah, that's what you want, and you want to be able to have that conversation where you go, look, go watch this documentary.
Yeah.
The phenomenon. Go watch this. And then your show, listen to this guy, Lou Elizondo, I spoke to. Go and listen to him. Go.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Go watch Rogan and listen to Avi Loeb.
Yeah.
The stuff's already there.
Yeah.
It's almost historical content.
Yeah.
Go and listen to it. It'll get you up to date very quickly. No tinfoil hat stuff.
Right.
And then let's have a conversation.
Yeah, no, and that's it's funny now because like I now people are starting to, especially when like that American Airlines thing happened, where you get the audio of the pilot talking, and you got this group of buddies. Hey, what'd you think of that? And I'm like, well, it's weird, it's crazy. Here's my thing. I was like, it's fair to say that most airline pilots are ex-military. And so they take their jobs very seriously. For an airline pilot, an ex-military, probably ex-military, we don't know for sure, but for him to see something like that fly over his plane and then to pick up the radio and call it in, to me is a massive admission to what he was seeing was out of the realm of normality when it comes to flying commercial airlines.
Yeah.
To describe that thing, that it looked like a missile and was moving at that speed, it had to have been pretty moving for him to pick up the radio and call that in. Now, I would love to hear the radar or the ground team respond to that. I wish we had the audio for that, and I would love to see the radar information. I mean, there's a lot of data missing from this, but I love that all of my friends are like, "What do you think?" And it's like, it's cool, but we need all the data, and it's just not there. But it's interesting to see that these people that are not in this group of UFO holics are starting to get engaged with it.
And people are very dismissive as well, that they think people like us and people interested in this subject only care about UFOs and aliens, and it's okay. So that pilot saw something, and they get dismissive, and they'll say, well, it was probably just some secret test. Okay, so your government is flying secret test flights over commercial airliners. That's a huge no-no. Yeah. If something goes wrong with that, people die. Same way, if it's Russian or Chinese, then that's a huge problem that you have them testing secret tech above your commercial airspace. Yeah. So again, that's worth investigating. But then people, well, it could have been a missile test. Okay, so now your government's testing missiles above commercial airliners. Again, that's an issue.
No, it's fun to paint these people into a corner.
Yeah,
I love it.
The Tic Tac was the same. That was probably, and people will say that was probably just US tech being tested on its own military. If one of those, okay, so let's go with it's human technology that we've broken the laws of physics, back engineered, whatever it might have been. If something goes wrong because of human error, whether those things are piloted or it's AI or whatever, a lot of people die, and you're then talking about, nuclear powered vessels. Well, that Tic Tac hits one of those. That's it. That Tic Tac hits Fravor's plane, and Fravor and his wingman go down. That's a huge story.
Do you think we hear about that if that happens though? Probably
not.
Yeah.
You probably don't, but the fact that we have heard about this at all, I think, is testament to the fact. And let's be honest, just to take it back a little bit, Chris Mellon sat at the end of Unidentified, and once again, almost with a sigh in his voice, said, it's not Russian, it's not Chinese, it's not the US, it's not human, essentially, is what he's saying. These people can't say this enough. And either they are telling the truth, which is a wow, or they're lying, in which case, why are they going to this extent to make up this lie?
Right. No, that becomes a completely different can of worms that if you open, I'm praying to God that's not the case. And I don't think it is. But if there was a case to be made for that, I think the reason would be to fund a space force. You want $1 trillion budget, and they're talking about like the potential. I've covered the potential budgets of what it would cost to get a full-fledged running space force up and running. And you're talking in the trillions of dollars. Like it would take you would have to double the military budget today to get it just up and running. So How do you get that budget? You scare people. That's how you do it. I don't think that's what's happening. That would just be something so nefarious on a level that is uncomprehendable. But if there was an argument to be made, that would be it. And maybe the motivation behind that is that they do know a lot more information on what's intruding in our skies, and maybe they are worried, maybe they are scared, and they don't want to freak anybody out, so they're slowly leaking information to get people prepared that, hey, we're going to start building a space force, and we're going to start demanding tax dollars to fund this space force. It's a conspiracy theory. I've got zero proof. It's just an argument as to why possibly someone like Christopher Mellon would do that. But you're reaching at straws to think that something like that would happen, and you would need a mountain of proof to prove it. And you would need a lot of really nasty, evil people to coordinate and pull something like that off. I don't think it's possible.
And I would just ask, okay, so say that was the case.
Yeah.
We've got our space force to help protect us against these objects coming from space. What about the ones that are already here or don't need to come in from space?
Right. If that's the case, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's yeah. I got a close eye on the Space Force just because from a taxpayer, I don't think there's room in the budget for this. I think it would be now 6th branch of the military.
I wonder how close the Netflix series Space Force is to the actual US Space Force. And I would hedge a guess that it's a lot scary how close it could actually potentially be.
Yeah. I would not shock me either. That is for sure. Real quickly, I want to say hey to the Undead Gaucho. He's in the chat. What's happening, my friend? He's going to be coming on the show. We got to schedule that, by the way.
He's a terrible guy. Yeah, they are
awful
things about him. Yeah,
I just want to get him on the show to yell at him. So I got a question for you. Why is it? And when you look at a globe, the globe is incredible. Even maps are incredibly inaccurate to how big countries are. And the United States is probably one of the most exaggerated sizes on a globe. It is minute compared to, Africa or Antarctica or, Russia, the Soviet Union, or China. It is so small. But when you look at a map or a globe, it takes up, a fourth of it. Knowing that the United States isn't as geographically big and that these maps don't accurately depict the sizes of these countries on a relative scale, that is. Why do you think that there are more sightings here in the United States per capita than anywhere else on the planet?
I think people potentially in the US, you've got Hollywood as a huge influence over there. Mm-hmm. And, Star Trek is from the US and Star Wars, you're going back these shows 40s, 50s, 70s, things I never watched, but you hear about like Mystery Science Theater, The Outer Limits, the Twilight Zone. So there's always been a culture for the mysterious, and Roswell happened there. So it's and I've got people saying you're bombs, but I just think it has to be somewhere. I just think people there are a lot more desensitized. Mm-hmm. And maybe a little bit more accepting of it as well. It's a very religious country across a lot of different parts of it as well. Technologically, it's always been one of the more advanced countries, so more people have cameras, no matter the quality of them, over whatever time period we're talking. It's a very populated country as well, regardless of how big it may not be according to maps and whatnot. So it's just, there's more people. I think it's the type of place where more people are likely to report. I think there's just a culture, and it's maybe that kind of American psyche that they're more willing to do that. Whereas in the UK, I think more people see UFOs than not, and I would say 99% of them don't report or say anything about them.
That's interesting. I mean,
It's not very British. It's
yeah. I was to say, that's a good theory. I don't think anyone's ever put it like that. I also would say, just to put on top of that theory, there's probably a lot more military testing here as well.
Yeah.
Than in a lot of other countries around the world. And people are probably confusing that take. But let me ask you this. Do you think, or what do you think the possibility is that human beings have cracked an exotic form of energy or propulsion?
Yeah, we're much further ahead than we let on. An iPhone now, if you want to use an example, going back 30 years ago would be incredible. I remember as a kid just imagining what it'd be like to walk about with a TV in my hand. Yeah. And then you got things like, for people that remember, like this, was it Sega had a handheld console that you could put a cartridge in that had an antenna, and you could watch TV on it, and it was like the most incredible thing.
Yeah.
And to think how terrible that would be now. And then let's just go back a little bit to if you dropped an iPhone off in the middle of World War I, that would be like witchcraft. That would be literally be like magic.
Yeah.
Like an iPhone or two iPhones could have won the war for a country.
Right.
Like just depending what, who had them in whose hands. So it's no massive leap to think that we've either broken it, or I think we have potentially back engineered stuff. I think some of these crashes that have happened may not have been crashes. There's a lot of people talk now that some of these craft are archaeological finds. Then you start to ask where they put there, where they crashed some time ago and we find them. Are they kind of gifted? You don't know. I especially with the way Lou talks a lot about stuff and his mankind versus mankind's.
Right.
I start to wonder how much that these things are here. Some of them already kind of amongst us. So
well, I did love that analogy that you had said, and can't remember what show it was, where you had compared this phenomena to being similar to us going fishing. Like when you catch a fish, you don't pick it up and start talking to it and saying, okay, well, have a good day, fish. And then, put it back. Yeah. Sometimes you eat the fucking thing, like, so I love the idea of this could be just something as simple as an entity fishing, and we're just happen to be on the hook. And I found that as like, man, God, can you imagine like how many brains would pop around the world if it was as something as just horrific as, we're just fish in a bowl. And
I mean, some of those fish go back pretty traumatized, I'm sure, after thrown up on a hook, kept in a boat, a picture's taken of them, with them having no concept of what a camera or a boat is.
Right.
And then they go back down and
explain that.
Yeah, you're that fish, and you imagine Finding Nemo, you'd go down and little Nemo tries to tell Dory that I've just been up there and here's what's happened. It's crazy. It's
absolutely
there's nothing up there. There's nothing above the water. Like it's just it's just space.
Yeah. No, it's when and if we are alive and we get any sort of resemblance of just like capital D disclosure, the the alien bodies, the White House lawn event, the big one, I don't think it's gonna be at least here in the States. I think people will blink at it and go, all right, I'm gonna go to work.
I think people are more ready for this stuff now. After the year we have had, if you went back even 13 months ago when we knew about COVID, and let's forget about people saying things aren't real and all that nonsense, okay, that there is a virus, okay, people have died worldwide. So if you go back and you explain this is what the next year is going to be like, it would have been crazy and really hard to like think about, and here's all the things that are going to happen, and some of it might have sounded quite scary. But see, having lived through it, and you're used to lockdowns and wearing masks everywhere and queuing to go and buy bread and stuff that you never thought would have happened in like first world countries, then why not line up the aliens next? And maybe people's psyches have totally shifted to the point that they're a little bit more accepting of it now as well.
Yeah. No. So yeah, no, Alejandro Rojas did a great presentation on religions and UFOs. I recommend going to check it out. And basically at the end of that presentation, he agreed with what you just said. People are ready. Religions are ready. Everybody's sort of prepared for this. But we're going to start wrapping up here soon because I don't want to take too much more of your time. I could have you here for, honestly, all night. But I did put a link to the StreamYard in the comment section. So if you guys want to call in and go live with us here, you can. I just ask, please don't be naked. And turn down whatever device you're listening on, and try and be connected to a Wi-Fi signal because Wi-Fi tends to work the best. But if you're too shy to call, I totally understand that as well. Throw your questions in for either me or Andy or both in the chat section, in the comment section, and put your question in caps. That way I don't miss it. I know there's a lot of stuff that has been said in the chat. I've pretty much missed all of it, but I want to thank Explorer Lab, Signal, Strafe, Christian, Shadows of Your Mind Magazine, Dan, Andy, Adam. I said Andy, you're right here. And Dave, I want to thank all you guys for stopping by. Aaron. So yeah, I'll keep that open. In the meantime, do you think, because there's one of the things that, like a Stephen Greer pushes a lot of, the reason why they're hiding this is because of the tech. The tech will change the world. The tech will there's no way to profit from it. All tech. And in my mind, I think that tech already exists to be dependent of oil. What do you think of that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The tech probably existed in some form back when Tesla managed to harness what he harnessed. And when you're that level of genius, and his background's fascinating, and it's almost ET himself. Like when you die and the FBI and other 3-letter agencies raid the hotel room and steal all your stuff and hide it away, there's a reason for that. So yeah, the technology, alien or not, is there. And people talk about frequency, vibration, energy is all around us, and it was, you can literally harness the energy from nothing. And you look back to like the pyramids and the way they're structured, and things coming to a point, and again, they could potentially channel different forms of energy. And yeah, that's been around for a long time.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of nuclear. Like, I think we got Dave. Let's get Dave in here. I was gonna say, I think we have a like nuclear energy. The military pops these nuclear reactors in aircraft carrier and in submarines, and they can power these things for hundreds of years. And it's clean, it's efficient. You don't need the dependency of any other fuel systems. And, why not take that and apply it to a country or a city or a neighborhood? Greer never sort of mentions that the tech is already there. It's just the stigma that's attached to it is what's preventing us from pursuing it.
Can I just tell you why before Dave comes in? And hi, Dave. Because you can't trust people. They were, you could make people's phones last forever with no need to ever charge them by putting a very, very, very small nuclear battery inside of them. But you can't trust people to not buy lots of phones and blow them up. So that's why we don't do it.
Yeah, but I mean, we've got energy systems that power cities now. We're not allowed in there. It would be the same thing. I'm not suggesting to put a nuclear reactor in a phone. I see where you're going. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that instead of having these power facilities, especially in some cases the solar power racket that's kind of going on, where a lot of these solar power, they don't provide enough energy and they end up running off of gas systems to provide energies that's needed. So it just doesn't work right this second. The energy's just not powerful enough to replace gasoline, whereas nuclear can easily replace gasoline, and it would get us out of a lot of trouble from a foreign policy standpoint. And we wouldn't have to depend on all of these extreme countries to get our energy from anymore. I just think I guess my point is that I don't think that the technology aspect of why the government isn't being truthful on this is the reason why they're not being truthful. I don't think it's the technology, because I think we already have the tech that exists that can replace those things. It's just there are a lot of reasons why we don't pursue it. Stigma mainly, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Money.
Yeah,
probably being, unfortunately, the obvious.
I mean, you could still put a meter on nuclear tech.
Yeah, but if you're like a multi billionaire just now, okay, and you make that money off of gas, then why do you want anything to change? And you're in that elite anyway, and you've got a lot of power, and your friends have a lot of power because of your association with them. So why change it? They don't care about Luis or Dave or Andy. And that's not me getting preachy. You know, if I was a billionaire in that position as well, I'm not going to pretend I would be really charitable and set up all kinds of foundations. I like to say I would.
Yeah.
You know, if I won the lottery, I'd love to give lots of money to some kids' hospital. I like to think I would, but you know, I've not been in that situation yet.
Yeah, well, I always think of it as, and Dave, we keep putting you off, all right? Just don't say anything. Just stand there.
Just keep doing it. That's good.
Just look pretty. But no, jump in anytime you want, my friend. But I just forgot what I was going to say. Dave, welcome. How you doing?
Right.
What do you think?
Hi,
what do you think about what we've been talking about?
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. I mean, I jumped on a little bit late. Going back to the big phone home, what I wanted to kind of ask as well is how are we going to get kind of the more well-known celebrities involved as well? Because Robin Williams is well known for having an interest in the subject, and we've had Demi Lovato recently and Miley Cyrus. Obviously, they're big, high-profile media reports. But do you think we could reach out to? You know, I'm sure you've got some friends in LA and Hollywood who are into the subjects as well. I mean, how can we get them involved? Do you think?
I think it's as simple as reach. If you know, and again, we could put those lists of celebrities and sort of include it in this list of committee members, Senate and both Congress, and make a third list of celebrities that we should also reach out to on a social media platform. It's a fantastic idea, because I think if you get 20, 30 people, it doesn't take a lot to sort of, if they're all tweeting the same thing and at the same time, it's going to get some of their attention. But yeah, I mean, I would love to have Joe Rogan talk about the big phone home, or Miley Cyrus, or any one of the, you know, Post Malone was just at Fugel's ranch. And we've had Jeremy Corbell tweet about this. We've had Chris Mellon tweet about it. We've had Lou Elizondo tweet, and we had Brandon Fugel talk about it. I've asked these guys. Jeremy Corbell's in, by the way, and I've asked. I'd love to get George Knapp, and I'd love to get his voice. I'm part of me is. Because I have a show here, right? And I'm an actor, and there's a lot of fun that I have on my show. And sometimes I make fun of people, and I have fun with these topics. And so if somebody sees my show and is offended by it and doesn't like me because of what I said or my viewpoint, I'm struggling with the fact that, well, should I be a little more, cordial when talking about these things, or should I just ignore it and have fun and do the show the way I want to do it? And will that put me in awkward positions when I'm asking these people to lend their voice and asking these people to help? And I would just say, I hope not. I hope that we can come together on this common ground and again start pointing the fingers up instead of at each other. So that would be my plea to them. But yeah, man, I mean, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I do have a list of like celebrities that I would, of course, love to reach out to. And I think that's a great idea. I'm going to add it to the list of congressmen. And this, by the way, this list that I'm creating, I'm going to make a video about it next week and show everybody what I created. So that way you guys know what's coming, but hopefully this will somehow, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I know nothing about websites, but this will be on the website. So when you start calling and helping me with this effort, you guys can just share this file, or I don't know how we're going to do it because it's a pretty big file. There's a lot of Congress and phone numbers and things. It's a big file. And now to add celebrities to it. So I'm not sure how to do it from a website perspective. I'm sure the three of us will be having that discussion behind closed doors with some people soon. But that's going to be the thing is this list. And this list was the person who recommended to make this list was Stephen Bassett. So I got to thank him. It was his idea. It was just a pain in the butt to put together, but yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, I know some celebrities, and there's an actor that I played golf with the other day who just worked on Tom DeLonge's movie. And he's agreed to come on the show when that movie comes out. So, and he's got a huge Twitter and YouTube presence. So, I told him, I'm like, hey man, if we can get Tom DeLonge on this, that'd be great. Any angle that I could work from my end, obviously I'm going to try and do, but I think the next thing to do, the most important thing for me right now is to make everyone in Washington, D.C. aware of what we're doing and the day we're doing it on. And then once that's done, then my next step will be getting in touch with all of the celebrities and the people outside of Washington, D.C. that have a passing or very, like Dave Foley or, again, Joe Rogan, any one of these people. Like that's, to harness and galvanize UFO Twitter, like every day I'm going to put out a list of people that I want UFO Twitter to blast, and for these, 10 people today, this is what we're going to ask them to do. And let's see who bites, let's see who bites. That's the plan anyway.
See with that, actually, Luis, I was thinking when you mentioned earlier about how we could help in the UK about, we can't write to congressmen, etc. But the time difference stuff I mentioned could really help with that, because you're going to be speaking to an audience on 2 different coasts, and you've got a 3-hour time difference potentially. Yep. Then in the UK, we are like 5 to 8 hours ahead of that as well. So we could be sending tweets before these people are even up or awake, and then you've got the next load coming, and it's almost like wave after wave after wave on the same day, hitting from different areas as well. So that's the kind of stuff people in the UK, like you've got Graham and Strafe and stuff in the chat that I can see, those are the kind of guys that would help with that, I'm sure, as well. Yeah,
no, that's a great idea. That is a fantastic idea. Yeah, I mean, that's the idea, is to bombard them so they can't ignore it, and hopefully we get a response. And then once we get that response, that's sort of our door, our foot in the door to maybe get them to commit. And that's how I think I got Jeremy and Brandon, because it's like, well, how can you say no to this, man? Like, even if you hate my opinions, which is, hey, you obviously have the right to do. And I welcome, please hate my opinion and tell me why, so that way I can maybe change it. But we can come together on this. Like, we know that all governments have way more information than they're letting on. What that information leads to, who knows, but just release it so that way we can scrutinize it. We can unleash the internet on it. Like Mick West, for all of his faults and all of his greats, like when that Chilean video came out, he was one of the guys who made it very clear as to what that was. And that's helpful. Like the Chilean army was looking at that video for 2 years and they couldn't figure it out. It was on the internet for 1 week, and it was completely figured out. It's just like, yes, man, like, let us help you. Let us take this information and all scrutinize and look over it, so that way we can put it back out on the table, regurgitate it as data, as usable data.
Yeah, Dave's a big fan of Mick.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. The lot of respect for his video game.
Yeah.
I didn't even know he was a video game designer. Is that true?
Yeah. Tony Hawk's.
Yeah, first.
I had no idea.
Tony Hawk documentary floating around about the creation of this video game.
And Mick is on that documentary as a talking head. Yeah.
So that's why he's got all this free time to scrutinize UFO video. He's just making all the residuals off that Tony Hawk game, man.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. That's interesting. I had no idea that he was a game developer. That's wild. You figured a game developer would have a little bit more of a open mind toward this, no? Like, what game developer is sitting there in his dungeon, working on his video games going, I'm going to get these UFO guys, these jerks.
These geeks.
Yeah, these geeks. like, what do you, come on, dude, you're the ultimate. Why aren't you on our side? That's, it's.
Well, thing is, he included an Area 51 level on the first 2 Tony Hawk games.
That's right, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
There was even a little grey on a operating table in a lab.
That's funny. I wonder if he had a belief in it as a young developer and nerd.
I mean, apparently he said it was just a pop culture reference.
I mean, in that game, there was cheat codes you could use where you could defy the laws of physics. I mean, you can't actually do a 7,000-degree spin on a skateboard, but in that game, you could. And it's fun to do that. You know, Mick, some of us like this topic and enjoy talking about it. You don't have to go out to your koi pond with your soap and a rope and start swinging it about in front of your GoPro. It doesn't prove anything.
And who's the last person you saw grinding for 10 minutes on a skateboard?
I did love your response to him on Twitter, where it was just like, "Oh, an interview with Lou Elizondo where he tells you the data that you can't access is very compelling." Exactly what I thought this interview was going to be. Something I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, I thought that tweet was funny from you, Andy.
I got some abuse after that.
Yeah. Well, man, I mean, you know, everybody has their extreme believers, and
I enjoy it.
I love it. I love it. I love the hate. I always love. I mean, when I get a thumbs down on a video, I'm always like, "Oh, rad! I did something right." I think.
Yeah, that's me. That's me that does that for you. It's not.
Well, I appreciate it.
It keeps you grounded, doesn't it? When you go in and dislike your own videos, someone didn't like it, and it was me. So
that's. I mean. Look, I do love criticism because it helps me grow. You know, it always makes me look at things from someone else's perspective. And you know, I'm not right all the time, and I try to tell people on this show it's okay to be wrong. Like, it's okay to be wrong about UFOs. If I've got the Bob Lazar theory wrong, and something comes out tomorrow that says I was wrong on that theory, I will make a video that minute telling you how wrong I was. I've got no issues with that at all. I just want the data. Just give me the data. And I want the data to be looked at from as many perspectives as it can. I just want it to be torn apart. You know, that's how I would like everyone to try and get to the bottom of this topic. Loyalties, aside, who just put your loyalties and your belief systems aside, and let's try and get to that data, because that's where it's at.
Luis, I've said several times, and I've spoke to Dave about this as well. Like, I'll go by the mantra with a subject that we're not all going to be right, but we could all be wrong. Yep. So let's just wait and see what happens. Like, and if you want to speculate, there's better data points than others that we have. Yeah. There are people that we're better leaning towards. For me, Lou Elizondo is that guy. Chris Mellon's that guy. Then, more so than Stephen Greer, who is not that guy. So yeah, there's a lot in the subject worth looking into, but there's nothing that is that 100% proof. Yeah, it's just not there at the minute.
Yeah, no, that's true. Dave, what do you got?
Well, I was just about to say I'm going to hop off to carry on working on the mag. But
yeah, all right. Fair enough. Well, dude, I appreciate you stopping by, and I can't wait to read this article having to do with the big phone home and the next issue of Shadows of Your Mind magazine.
Yeah, I need to. I'll drop you an email over the weekend, mate.
Yeah,
catch up.
Well, hey, thanks for stopping in, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you very soon here, Dave. So don't be shy. I appreciate you coming by.
Nice. See you later. See you, mate.
Ciao. Thank you.
Bye, Dave.
All right. Well, there's so much more I want to talk to you about, Andy. So much more, but I'm gonna let you go because you've been so damn gracious with your time. But before we do, I want to point folks and just tell a little bit about your Patreon, your website, where people can find your stuff. Go ahead, sell yourself to the 649 followers of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Let's what do you got for them?
Not much. If you find a Scottish accent strangely arousing, then I will for $10 I'll read literature of your choice to you in a sexy accent. No, I mean that's always on the table. So yeah, look, the podcast is free for everyone. I put out the episodes. I try to every Friday. Like you, Luis, I've got a day job. I've got a young family as well, and I've got another baby on the way. Well, I don't. It looks like I do, but my wife does. So I try and do one episode or one pod every single week, and the guests are always like really good people to listen to. They're not always the most famous. That's impossible to do, but do you know what? they're really good conversations that I think people that are worth hearing. I also do like bonus shows as well. Dan usually joins me for extra shows, and Sean Cahill's been on recently for an extra couple of bonus pods. I do roundtables. I put out as much free content as I can. This isn't free for me to do. So like you've got on just now, I've got the patreon.com/that UFO podcast, where the shows go up ad free. So there's no adverts played. They usually go up at least 24 to 48 hours early as well. So you get to listen to them first. And I've just started, just with the kind of success of the show and the amount of listener questions I get in, which I love. I can't always fit them all on the show. So I've started asking the guests for 10 minutes more of their time, and I fit some more listener questions in and a little bit more. I never want to hide stuff behind a paywall. It's just a little bit more content if people want to hear that a little bit more. So yeah, if I was ever going to do that, I would have had Lou Elizondo's interview on Patreon early. That went out straight away as soon as it was done on the free feeds. And the YouTube slowly getting stuff put up as well. So, but yeah, follow me on Twitter at UFO UAPAM. You can email us UFOUAPAM@gmail.com. And I've got the Facebook, the Instagram. All the cool kids have those as well.
Yeah, well, I've got all of the links. I don't think I have your Instagram and Facebook down below, but I definitely got your Twitter and the link to your Patreon show. So don't be shy. Click the links and subscribe to this channel, because the guests that come on the show are amazing, but the questions are even better. And the host is you're a great host, man. You're a great host. I really, really, really enjoy your show. I'm glad that I found you guys.
Thanks.
And I cannot wait. And I hope you come back. I know the time difference is crazy, but I hope you're available to join us for the Big Phone Home. We're going to start putting a schedule of guests that hopefully will stop by on that day and rap with us for 10 or 15 minutes on the day of. But yeah, thank you for everything you do, Andy, and never stop, because it's amazing work. And yeah, I cannot wait to have you back. But thank you so much for coming aboard, getting weird with me here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. I want to thank everyone out there, Jeremy McGowan, Kristen Thompson, Alien Girl, Derek, Christian, Zignal, everyone who joined us here for the chat. Strafe, I don't want to forget anybody. Graham Rendell, I'm not sure if Dead Gaucho, the Undead Gaucho, all of my new friends. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell, so that way when we have another awesome discussion with folks like Andy McGrillen here, you guys don't miss it. You're reminded of it. So Andy, my friend across the pond, can't wait to talk to you again, dude. Can't wait to see you on the Big Phone Home. And until the next meeting, I'll see you soon.
Anytime. And I mean that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, you guys. Thank you all so much. Until next time, we'll see you. Be safe and peace. Should be told I'm just delaying to try and find this outro video, but here it goes.